I lived across the street from Harold for more than a decade. It's amazing what you see about people when you catch swaths of their life in passing. It was never that I intended to watch him or anything like that. This was merely a matter of living near him. I was there when they had the movers, when they renovated their house, and when they became just Harold. It was a dark morning with thick moisture in the air that served to let everyone know of the approaching storm. I was fighting off a cold of epic proportions, chewing lemon cough drops like candies, and drinking cup after cup of peppermint tea. The mixture of these flavors tasted awful, but at least I could taste something. It wasn't very often that I'd call out of work like that, so I guess it was purely dumb luck that made it so I saw him across the street. Even being sick, I tried downing a few slices of toast just so I'd have something on my stomach. This made it so I ended up reading Reddit on my phone while nibbling on the edge of a piece of burnt toast. There was Harold, rushing across his lawn with his robe hanging open to expose his white briefs, dead-eyed with scruff grown across his throat. He bent down to lift the newspaper at the end of his driveway and shook it from the plastic bag that had collected the morning's moisture. After thumbing through it, some fit overtook him, and he began ripping the paper till it all fluttered away on the wind, catching along sidewalk crags or bush branches like flags signaling his surrender. I felt for the man. Honestly, I'd seen the whole thing when Patricia stomped across the lawn over there and peeled out of the driveway. We all liked her. Most people that brought Swedes to welcome people to the neighborhood could be overbearing with their niceties, but she had a way with it that made everyone comfortable. I can only imagine the misery Harold was living with. Rumors said that it was an ongoing thing, as it tends to be a culmination of symptoms till they had to be exorcised from each other. People tried getting Harold to come out to functions, but he said no to a lot after she left. The poor fellow was taking it exceptionally hard. I watched him as he moved back to his front door and slammed it shut behind him. By the time I'd given up on the toast, Harold poked his head back out the door and peered around to make sure that no one was watching him. The coast was clear, or so he thought, because I could see him well enough. He went chasing after the strands of paper he'd left behind, this time taking precautions to tie his rope shut. I remember thinking then, how weird a grief that must be to lose someone like that makes you do weird shit as for me. I've enjoyed my own company too much to muddy the waters with anything beyond platonic. Once he'd collected most of them, he trod out of sight once more, giving me enough time to look at a few more wholesome memes and finish my cup of tea. Finally, at some point that I'd not even seen because I'd become so engrossed in my scrolling, Harold was in his yard between the two maples, angling against a spade with effort. Even from a distance, I could see that the morning sprinkle was making quick work of his bed hair, so it conformed to the shape of his skull. My brain took minutes to realize what he was doing, but as the pile of wet earth beside him grew, it registered. But why? What the hell was he thinking? Was he planning something? I watched him like that for at least an hour, sipping through 2 cups of tea. He was in a hole, halfway up his shins and caked in mud. As I polished off the last cup, I moved to grab my umbrella and stepped outside. Harold didn't even look up at me as I stood in front of him. He was a man possessed. Groans escaped him each time he drove the spade into the ground, but as his loafer-covered foot came down on the foothold and his arms pried to jimmy the dirt loose so he could toss it to his side, he let out a satisfied grunt. Standing there on the sidewalk, just on the other side of his hedge with the rain coming down light, I looked at whether or not he noticed me. He didn't make it known. "Hey there, buddy. What are you doing there? How are you, neighborino?" He asked me without even looking up from his work. It came from him like a jaunty, self-aware joke. Another shovelful met the pile. "Do you need me to call someone?" He laughed and continued shoveling. For a minute, it seemed like he wasn't going to respond to my question. What? I jumped at the sound of my own name coming from his mouth. "You're a nice guy." He spat and wiped his forehead, leaning against the handle of the spade. At least he'd stopped digging, if nothing else. His eyes were lucid, like he'd never before been alive, and it was only now that it found him. Or maybe he was just crazy. I used to make these little ships. You've seen them before, right? Whenever Patty threw her parties, I'd show them off. I'm sure I've shown you before, haven't I? Well, they were in the bottles. He put out his hands to demonstrate the size of the bottles. I nodded. "You see." Making these little ships is a real pain. For me, the hardest part was always raising the mast. I hated building those things, but that's what I was supposed to do, right? Does that make sense? He gestured to the house behind him. I got real shaky hands, so putting those tiny pieces in just the right places always drove me straight up the wall. You understand. It was rough, but whenever I'd finish one, I'd carefully take it to wherever Patty was in the house, and I'd show it to her. She loved those damn things. They're cute, she'd say, or some variant thereof. It's cliche, but it was happiness too, and that's what I always wanted. This, again, another manic gesture to the house. This was the American dream they tell you about before your balls drop, kiddo. Do this, get this degree, buy this house, marry this lady, because she makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside. Then poof, one day, it's all gone, and you know what you have to do then? I shook my head. The early autumn air was giving me chills, or maybe Harold was. You gotta smash those bottles. You have to, because it makes you feel something. You throw them across the room and watch them explode for so many hours. He shook his head and laughed. I'll tell you, man, those things were a lot more fun that way. I felt good and bad at the same time. Cathartic. I said, I guess, man, whatever you want to call it. But that's what you have to do sometimes. He looked at the hole he was standing in, and then at the yard as a whole. White picket fence, my ass, but Harold, yeah, you don't have a fence. He cut his eyes at me. But slowly, a smirk started to slice across the lower half of his face until it evolved into a hearty chuckle. Thanks, I needed that. Sometimes you have to dig a hole. I asked. Harold snapped his finger. That's damn right. I can't explain exactly what it was that jumped into me at that moment, looking back on it. It's the most indescribable sensation. I looked back to my house across the street, beneath my umbrella in the dreary rain, and even in the cool weather, I could feel fire in the pit of my stomach. Perhaps he infected me with madness, but I'd rather state my case as this. Sometimes you've got to dig a hole, because that's what feels right. Splashing through puddles as I ran through the rain towards the shed in my backyard, I found my old worn-out shovel. It was rusted from years of disuse, and I bolted towards Harold's, even forgetting my umbrella. I must have lost my mind running around in the rain with coal to go and dig a hole with my neighbor. When I say it aloud, it sounds insane, but when you're in the moment, well, things are different. I jumped into the small hole he'd created and began chipping away at the edges and loosening the dirt so that we'd have a wider area for both of us to dig comfortably. He said nothing to me as I joined. My tired, cold, brittle body ached with each passing moment, but then something else joined in. I've heard people talk about getting a runner's high from pushing beyond your limit, and that seems as good an explanation as any other. The light rain gave way to a sunny midday lull as each shovel push felt less like the last and more like we were doing something important. It could have been a few hours or only a few minutes before I looked up to examine my surroundings. Regardless, when I did look up from the ground, we cleared out enough dirt so that we were standing in a hole up to our waist. Harold continued his digging, but I took a moment to catch my breath, and when I did, I heard a familiar voice. Clay, what are you two doing? I looked up. Standing in nearly the same spot as I had been earlier that morning, there was Rogers and Margaret. Rogers was a man in his mid-30s who wore sweaters everywhere and walked his dog around the neighborhood to shit on other people's lawns. In fact, in his right hand was a leash drawn taut as the little mutt most likely watered Harold's hedges hidden in the leaves. Margaret, on the other hand, was an elderly runner in her bright thick green and purple sweats. She hardly got any workout, if you ask me. I think she went around the neighborhood hoping to catch or dish the latest gossip. I grinned at the two of them. You know how it is. Sometimes you have to dig. You're more than welcome to join us if you'd like. They looked at one another, then back at me. This time, Margaret spoke. What are you digging for? Digging for? I thought the question over for a moment. We're not looking for anything, if that's what you mean. I turned to look at my compatriot for support. Harold, tell them what you were telling me earlier. Harold barely looked up as he heaved another hunk of moist dirt out of the hole. It's all bogus. You work for things. You want to be loved and to love in return. And that's where you mess up because you should have been doing that to yourself the whole time and not searching for it from someone else. Then he sighed and looked up while leaning against his shovel handle. What I'm trying to say is, there's no reason to dig, but focusing on the task at hand sure does let my mind wander. Who needs therapy anyway? It's expensive and you could have been digging all along. Digging for the truth. It might look like dirt and roots to you, but to me this is where I'm figuring my shit out. As the two of them listened to him, I could see the light in their eyes return, and it felt once more like they were humans with a spark of initiative and not plain boring suburbanites. Roger swiped his hair back in contemplation, totally messing up the perfect widow's peak he developed. He lifted his dog and ran down the sidewalk, screaming over his shoulder, "I'll be right back." I watched him go for a moment, and then shifted my attention to Margaret, but she too was gone. When the two of them returned, I wasn't surprised. What did surprise me, however, is that while Roger showed up with a shovel on his shoulder like a rifle, Margaret came jogging back with a wheelbarrow full of tools, shovels, axes, pickaxes among the things she brought. It was a gas-powered auger, and I must admit that this did surprise me quite a bit. There was a feverish tinge in her face, one that said she meant business. I swear, when Harold heard the auger fire up, he grinned from ear to ear. It was contagious. It felt like the deeper we got, we were compelled by an external force of some kind, whispers just from around the corners of our faces. Everyone began talking about it. Our team of 4 quickly grew into 10, then 20, then 30. By the time the people getting off work drove by, babysitters were called for those that had children. When asked how long they'd be gone, they didn't give an answer and doubled the pay. Harry, Roger's husband, showed up to the hole, trying to urge him to drop this craziness. But it wasn't long till he found himself in the hole, digging along with the rest of us. We hacked the maples to pieces in a yard and moved those pieces into the street. By the time it was getting too dark to dig, Linus, a single dad, hauled over his grill and started cooking hamburgers and hot dogs for the tired diggers. It got to the point that I was standing in the hole. The top was nearly 15 feet over my head. Its diameter was at least 25 feet. We lounged dirt-covered, but smiling and joking, talking about the weather as we ate and cracked open a few beers. If not for the massive hole in Harold's front yard, it may have been a regular cookout. Gathering together string lights on poles and tiki torches, we brought the yard alive and set up plastic sunbathing chairs to bed down for the night. What was the plan for that? Well, I'd say it's obvious. All of us had the intention of continuing the project the following morning. I caught sight of Harold near the sidewalk, peering down into the hole. He sipped from a beer bottle, and a little satisfied smile played out across his face. On approach, he greeted me with a simple nod. "It sure is something, isn't it?" I said. That it is. Can't believe we made it this far. How long do you think it'll take till we can't go anymore?" He said. I glanced at the gathered crowd, falling asleep in plastic chairs or chatting amongst themselves in groups of 3 or 4 at a time. Well, I've heard people joking that they won't stop till we hit China. That's the sort of stuff only kids talk about, and I think it's magical that full-grown people can play pretend like that. There was a pause as I too stared into the pit, admiring it in all its glory. We've done a good thing here, haven't we? Certainly. Harold took a quick swig of the beer. This is crazy. He laughed. He had a tired look in his eye that I could sympathize with. You should get some rest. He checked the watch on his wrist. If we hope to make an impact tomorrow, we should start early. I put up 2 fingers and gave him a lazy, jokey salute. Good night. Night. Never before in my life have I slept like I did that night. It wasn't just tiredness or my cold either, if I were to guess. In black dreams, I heard what can only be described as electric bubbles in my ears. The screeching in the night filled me and hollowed me out, same as we did that pit. It was a nightmare, I should say that much, but it was so much more than that. The best way I could put it is that it felt as though my soul, even if I'd never been one to believe in such a thing before, was leaving my body, and I was a nothing person, less than human for it. Then the screeching in my dreams woke me, and I realized that I was not hearing the sounds of dreams, but the sounds of screams. I propelled myself off the chair and staggered around, bleary-eyed. It was still night or early morning. What's happening? I tried saying. My neighbors were running towards the pit, and there was already a crowd of them gathered at its edge. I followed, slapping my face awake. As I came to the edge of the hole among the others, I froze. There was a place at the opposite end of the pit where the dirt floor had given out to some unknowable chamber. From it sprang forth whipping, glistening tendrils, bright red and thin as paperclip wire. Each one writhed independently from the others, but must have come together on the end of some great unseen beast in the dirt. Several of them held Rogers well over our heads as I looked on with extraordinary horror at what I was seeing. The tendrils cracked like whips against his body, sending out shrill, puss-curdling screams. They shed him of his clothes and then began stripping him of his skin as well. My eyes shot to Terry. He looked entirely helpless at what was happening. I could see the frozen tears in his eyes, not quite accepting what was in front of his face. All our faces. I saw it, and I can tell you still that I have dreams of it, or sometimes I try and tell myself that it was all some fever mirage of my cold. But I know that's not true. It's impossible to retract. Roger's more red, runny muscles and exposed bone than anything else hardly looked like a human anymore. The tendrils lifted him ever higher and twisted his body like a rag, then dropped him dead, before recoiling into their subterranean lair. The hole in the pit that went deeper, the place it had spawned from, echoed a gurgle to signify that the chamber was large. Very large. Terry screamed finally, taking towards one of the ladders protruding from the hole. Margaret tried reaching for him, but he was too fast. In a moment, he was in the pit, on his knees before his husband. I couldn't bear to watch him cry over Rogers like that and tried scanning the area for Harold, but he was gone. Instead, my eyes fell on the flaps of skin that caught along the crags and the sidewalk, and the debris we created in our endeavor to dig our way to China. They flapped like flags in the wind. I couldn't help it. I stepped from the hole and keeled over, throwing up the hot dogs I'd had earlier. A few people joined me. By the time I wiped the muck from around my mouth and looked back up, Terry was already at the ladder again, at the bottom of the pit and screaming at somebody, anyone, to come help him as he carried Roger's corpse in tow. He was covered in his husband's blood. One of the corpse's legs moved across the ground, like a piece of bald lint on the edge of a string. Then I heard the noise from my dreams. It was maddening. It seemed to be coming from inside my own head, like a musical popping. It sent a shiver down my spine. At some point, tears began to flow as I looked at the crowd of gathered faces, and I could tell that they heard it too. And we all knew what it meant. We marched towards the ladders pressed around the edges of the hole, our feet no longer our own, each of us with a tool in our hands. Terry dropped the corpse and began walking towards the place the dirt had opened up, just as we owned it. We were going in, totally transfixed. I remember looking at the faces that came along, and I couldn't help but notice that Harold was not among them. I wondered briefly if he had had the sense to run away when he had the chance. As we filed into the chamber, one by one, the slanted dirt of the cave-in made for arduous moving. It must have taken us down another 100 feet, at least. Finally, our feet met solid stone. In the distance, there was a city of spires and ancient stone with firelight snapping intermittently. There was no logical reason for its existence. Seeing that place from even as far away as we did, I felt a sense of dread. I was sick, I was tired, and I was shaking from the existential horror before us. The city in the distance, beneath the impossibly high ceiling of the cavern, called us nearer. Among my neighbors, there were whispers of the most unfathomable possibilities. As we moved along, carrying tiki torches and pickaxes, what schlepping sounds came from overhead, and as we peered over our own heads to see what creature it was coming from, the ropey red tendrils of the thing that had killed Rogers dangled from the flat ceiling. The ropey limbs of the thing hung from its bulbous, fat body. It seemed to be breathing, but otherwise did not move. As Margaret removed a flashlight from her person and shone her light around, it became obvious that the ceiling was covered in those monstrosities, spaced out from one another by about 20 yards. "Jesus Christ," said Linus. "I can't believe this has been under our feet this whole time." "I don't think this was under our feet," I said. Hearing it aloud like that made too much sense. You'd have thought we would have heard these eldritch horrors knocking around before then. I don't think this place was here before. What the hell are you talking about? Linus cut his eyes from me, the fire from his tiki torch illuminating his face. He was scared. I could see it. I just mean, I think we did this. Margaret interjected. Our eyes followed where she pointed, and I felt a shiver run up my spine. Up the way, through boulders and sharp debris, we caught sight of watchers patrolling the edge of the city. Twig spider legs that bowed out with each step from atop round seats with spotlights scanning the area. The detail of them from so far away in the dark was blurred, but I can't promise you that they looked like monstrosities ripped from a painting. What are those? Even as I spoke the words, I knew that no living human could have looked up on them before, because every aspect of their anatomy seemed to defy all understanding. Seeing them made me so uneasy that I reached out for one of my neighbors in the dark so that I might have someone to hold on to. What are they? I repeated. Let go of me. Daryl, a devout member of the neighborhood watch, slapped my hand away. I offered him a weak smile. I'm sorry. I've just never seen anything like it. None of us have. It's phantasmagorical, I said, totally awestruck. Daryl and Margaret both looked at me funny and responded by simply peering ahead at the watchers. We walked, and as we did, I began to feel the cold I'd been suffering from prior begin to take hold over me. My nose began to run, my muscles ached, and I sniffled. I believe that working in the rain the previous day had done little to improve my situation. No one mentioned it, but I kept glancing overhead at the stringy things dangling from the ceiling, wondering if they could hear the noises I was making. My mind continuously went back to the way they'd utterly destroyed Rogers, and I couldn't help but shudder to think what they might do to me. How much longer till you think we reach him? Asked Linus. No one answered him. The echo of the infinite-seeming chamber was the only thing. It seemed that we went for perhaps hours, slipping or tumbling across the bent and moist rocks that the floor became as we neared the city of spires. All the while, those unnameable beasts overhead never left our visage. Whimpers escaped the crowd when we passed by one, edging around the limbs while giving them a wide berth. One of the red tendrils curled on itself, sending a shrill cry from Linus. The thing took little notice of us as we hurried along. The outline of the city ahead became even more clear. It feels like we've been walking forever, I said. Whether this was due to the fact that I was more tucker than the others, or if it was that we had trod over the rough terrain for a vast immeasurable time, I couldn't tell. We met a great rock face that stabbed towards the ceiling. It seemed our best bet at finding a place to rest, and I mentioned it in passing with grumbles over how we should continue moving dispersed. And we sat with our back to the flat surface of the rock. The others, too, began to express discontent with our journey. We never should have come here, hushed Margaret. Daryl scanned the surroundings from a position atop a waist-high boulder. I can't remember where the exit is. I don't think we can go back. The exit doesn't exist anymore. The anxiety in his voice crept up my spine. It was true. Why had none of us thought to leave behind guideposts for the journey back? Or was it that we had collectively accepted our fate and subconsciously decided none of us were going to leave anyway? I sat against the rock among a few half-familiar faces. That's not possible, said Margaret. She moved to the rock he was standing on, reaching up a hand. He hoisted her bony frame up, her gray hair catching around her face. As she swiped it back, she pivoted in all directions. There's this city. If we've come in a straight line, it should be somewhere over there. She pointed an inconsequential finger towards dark shadows, right? Daryl shook his head. Why have we come here? The madness was evident in his tone, but I was too tired to look up from my seated position against the big rock. I stared at the ground and wished I had something to blow my nose into. The others began setting up a makeshift camp, positioning torches in stone cracks, and laying out jackets to do so when I finally did look up again. I could see that Margaret and Daryl moved from their position on the rock and took up among the others. The ceiling, alien and starless with those monsters, made me uneasy. I spent my time counting the people in our camp, 28 scared faces. Each of them looked warily over their shoulders at every small noise. Margaret moved from person to person, and when she came to me to ask if I was feeling all right, I shrugged it off. She left me and continued roaming the camp with her hands on her hips, scanning further vicinities. Margaret pulled a hairband from her wrist and pulled her hair back into a ponytail. For a long moment, I was surprised at just how agile and full of energy the old bird was. Perhaps those daily walks through the neighborhood were paying off for her. I wish I'd felt the same in that moment after glancing around to make sure that no one was watching me. I quickly took the long sleeve of my shirt and blew my nose into it. A few people looked my way, but quickly went back to whatever conversations they were having. I was so tired. Rubbing my temples, I rose to my feet and moved to the same rock that Margaret and Daryl had been standing on. After shifting myself slowly up, I began looking around. Near the city, perhaps a mile away, were the watchers with the spotlights. I could just make out the vague shadowy figures riding atop them, and I briefly wondered whether they would be able to see me if they were to shine their lights in my direction. I rubbed my eyes. They felt tender to the touch, and I could scarcely keep them open. How I wished for the warm comfort of my bed in those hours. How I wish I'd never checked on Harold. It would have been better for me, better for everyone if I'd only left him be. The urge to leave that place was ever growing, ruminating in murmurs. Most of the group wanted to inspect the city, still transfixed by its spell, while others wanted to leave. It seemed the half that wished to carry forward had it in their heads that the only way out was through. Margaret was one of the more vocal about deserting whatever horrors lurked in that place, and I was right by her. Daryl and Linus both were vehemently defending that we continue. Once everyone's rested up, we should head on, said Linus. It's just like Harold said. There's some truth to be found here. What was all that digging for, if not this? Daryl, with his arms crossed, nodded alongside Linus. I shook my head. There's no reason for it. We've been duped, guys. Harold didn't know what he was talking about. He was just grieving. There was no reason for us to jump in and start digging too. What were we even doing it for? This was true. I couldn't even remember why I decided to help dig in the first place. It all felt so pointless. That's Bupkis, said Linus, and you know it just as well as I do. It's a general discontent with the state of affairs that's brought us here, and I only intend to resurface once I've found the purpose I've been looking for all my life. There's a magic to this place. It exists for a reason. It would have been nice if that were true, but looking around at the deep shadows of the massive cavern, I could see only desolation. Margaret cut in. I don't care what you do. I'm going back. She studied with a group. Those of you that want to leave can come with me or not. The mixed expressions of hopefulness and fear made me sick. It seemed that we were destined to split up, with half of us going on and half going back. I only hoped at that moment that we'd actually be able to find our way out of the cavern. Just as it seemed that Linus was going to respond, the first fish fell from the cavernous ceiling. It was some cod. Upon seeing it there, I blinked to make sure I'd not merely conjured it from my imagination. It came from seemingly nowhere at all, but as it landed on the flat ground in the center of us, it flopped and its mouth sucked and puckered at nothing as it reversed around. I reached a timid foot forward to nudge it with my shoe as Margaret peered up at the ceiling. As the words, "Where did that come from?" came from my mouth, another fish fell directly onto Margaret's upturned face. She shrieked and kicked the thing away. Within minutes, wet plod surrounded us as it began to rain down a waterfall torrent of ocean fish. A flounder bounced off my shoulder, slapping me with its tail. We took up our arms over our heads to cover ourselves from the incoming barrage of sea animals. It was the most insane thing I've seen in my entire life. The air smelled of salt, and the pattering of the fish landing on the ground is a noise I won't soon forget. The screams of my fellow humans echoed all around, barely above the sounds of the fish storm. We began to take cover near the great flat rock. I dove across people and wriggled fish to reach it, pushing and shoving and getting shoved in return. In panic, my shoulder met the rock, and I turned to look back at my neighbors frantically searching for shelter. In an uproar, I could see that Daryl was fighting with something clinging to his face as it wrapped its snaky limbs around his throat. He attempted to wrench the thing off, but it only pulled itself more tightly around him. It took far too long for my brain to realize what I was seeing. The thing holding itself to Daryl was an octopus with a head roughly the size of a Doberman. No one came to his aid, and he quickly fell to his knees. His last few screeching breaths left his lungs. I watched in concentrated, frozen terror through the last few still-lit flickering torchlights as Daryl's right hand came up in an arched claw to dig into the thing's chewy flesh. And then Daryl went still altogether. Margaret launched towards the thing, totally ignoring the falling fish, arching an axe as she might a baseball bat and swatting the octopus off Daryl's prone head. Snapping out of it, I sped forward, grabbing a hold of Daryl's wrist and dragging him to the relative safety of the big rock as Margaret stood guard. He didn't kick or scream, and I wished that he were only unconscious. As Margaret returned to the shelter of the rock, we went to shine a light on Daryl. His face was no longer a face, but a skull with open optic holes through which only pink brains could be seen. I recoiled. "That's not normal," said Margaret, shaking her head and kicking the rock face as she planted a flat hand against it. Looking back now, I think to myself what a strange thing that is to say. But in dire circumstances, the thing that needs to be said is so far from one's grasp that it too becomes fleeting, and there's nothing save the obvious and concrete. No, it was not normal. What were we gonna do? My voice was small, caught in my throat. I was surprised that anyone could hear me over the sound of the fish rain, but Linus did. We moved to the city where it's safe. There's no going back now. He wants us here. Even with a mad twinkle in his eye, I could clearly hear the fear in his voice. What exactly it was and why it wanted us here, I couldn't say. We stayed pressed to the rock till the fish stopped falling. By the time they did, we were nearly up to our knees in them, their dead eyes looking up at us. And sometimes their tails would twitch, forcing me to double-take to make sure there was not another tentacled creature among them. As we pushed on, stepping over or around the dying and dead fish, we came to a flat open area of ground that encompassed the city of Spires. It seemed it had been intentionally worn down. With every step, I felt we were more vulnerable. A spotlight from one of those horrid watchers passed over us as we marched, and I could nearly feel the heat of it. We froze, and the watcher ignored us, pivoting the light in another direction. I wondered if it could even sense our presence at all. My legs began to feel heavy, my arms too, but this wasn't the normal sort of tiredness I'd been experiencing up until that point. It felt as though I'd been drugged. Looking around at my neighbors as we went, I could sense a dazing in them as well. I watched as their limbs moved in slow motion, and it occurred to me that we were hardly making any leeway whatsoever. "Does anyone else feel tired?" I asked. "Yeah." I twisted my head around to see that it was Linus. "Now that you mention it, I'm feeling really tired. It's like I want to lie down and sleep. God, I've never felt like this before." It felt like someone was trying to pull my eyelids closed with pinched fingers. Something was amiss. The city of Spires ahead grew foggy, and the fires that illuminated it flickered. No, I was blinking. The slow blink of someone on the verge of sleep. Someone's cries met my ears. I turned my head to the right to see that Terry was sliding his feet along the smooth stone floor. Why'd Rogers have to die? It should have been me. He said the words so much like facts, while his ankle shifted forward in stumbling steps. The pickaxe he carried grinded along the floor of the cavern, as he dragged it with a limp wrist by the handle. A chorus of other tools soon followed as we all began to carry our tools in this way. Terry's eyes welled with tears. I should have died. He was losing his mind. It was all too much. No amount of what I said would be able to snap him out of it. He was giving up. He choked. "I just want to die." It was the wail of a dying critter. "Hey, I tried. It's gonna be all right, Terry. It's gonna be okay. Just push on. Don't give up. We're gonna make it out of here." No. For the briefest of moments, his eyes grew lucid as they met mine. "No, we're not, Clay. That's okay, though. I'm just gonna lie down for a little while." I heard the handle of his pickaxe clanging against the floor. He was no longer dragging it. "I'm just gonna lie down, and I'll catch up with you later." "All right? Don't do that." I tried shaking my head quickly to jumpstart myself out of this strange affliction. Margaret called out from somewhere behind. "Don't go to sleep." She sounded like she was having a hard time speaking. "It's trying to make us go to sleep." Terry fell to his knees. Just gonna close my eyes. It'll all be over soon enough. He fell onto the solid ground with a dull thud. Another body ahead fell. It was the lady who ran the salon down the road, but I could never remember her name. Then someone else to my left. It wasn't long till we were dropping like flies. Every thud of a body on the hard ground was another stake in the heart. It made me wonder how long I would last. Margaret called out from somewhere behind again. "Clay, you still awake up there?" "Yeah, I'm still here. I don't know how much longer I'm going to make it, Clay. Can you do me a favor? I have a granddaughter. If you make it out of here, will you tell her I love her?" There was a series of snuffles. "Will you tell her I love her and that I'm sorry I couldn't see her grow into a woman? Can you do that for me?" No. I was surprised how much command I still had over my own voice. Even though I could no longer turn my head to look behind and can only see the rotating watchers and city beyond, I didn't want to lose Margaret. "I can't do that because you're going to make it out of here. Same as me. You hear me?" A few more bodies struck the ground, and the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears was the only thing for miles. I waited and waited and waited for her response. Every step forward I took was met with nothing but the sound of my neighbors dropping. Was she already asleep? Had she succumbed to the wicked magic of the cavern? Was I the last one standing? Would this become my eternity, walking toward a dark city suspended in infinite time? "Okay, Clay," said Margaret upon hearing her voice. I felt a new strength in my legs, and even as my muscles met resistance like I was pushing through water, I began stomping defiantly towards the watchers, and the sounds of others' footfalls came too. Then the sinking feeling I had had in the pit of my stomach began to disappear, and I was sprinting. I'd broken the threshold of the spell, it seemed. As my muscles felt normal once more, I stopped to turn around. Laid out before me were mostly bodies. The only ones left were me and Margaret and Linus. He pushed on, slapping his face while she blinked repeatedly and rubbed her cheeks. "I've never felt anything like that before," said Linus. "I can't believe I made it." There was nearly a cheeriness in his voice till he met me and looked out onto the bodies. The many dead forms of the group fell behind. "My God," said Margaret. Red tendrils spilled from the dark recesses of the ceiling, reaching for the extremities of the dead or sleeping and suspending them in midair like puppets for a moment, before carefully, almost delicately, pulling them up and from our eyes into the shadows. As the bodies disappeared to the ceiling, a sound followed. The sound of grinding bones, of stripping wet, of those creatures above devouring them. There was nothing left in that open stone field but the torches and tools they'd left behind. I bit my lips shut to keep from screaming. It wasn't much farther till we passed the Watchers Patrol, and there were only 3 of us left. We were all as good as dead. "This is madness," said Linus, shaking his head. "I can't believe it." He was right. I couldn't believe it either. I couldn't believe any of it. Margaret was busy examining the Prussian blue walls of the firelit city as one of the Watchers stomped their spindly legs over us, giving me a perfect view of the undercarriage of its bulbous top. Beneath what must have been a cabin with some fashion of mechanisms were twisted tubes that pulsated as though they were attempting to emulate the bladders of a living thing. The Watcher's spotlight illuminated the faraway darkness in a perfect circle as it lifted its foot once more to proceed in its never-ending patrol. At the base of those thin legs were wide, bird-like appendages precariously balancing its top-heavy body. The screech of unseen gears broke the silence. It passed over like we were nothing more than inconsequential bugs. "Jesus," I said, glancing over to see that Margaret, too, had removed herself from the wall. She turned her face up to the thing. We looked at each other with our mouths hanging open. "Were those things?" Margaret shook her head. Linus interjected. "Big assholes," he spat. There was a new air about him, unreserved. More than anything else, it made me extremely uncomfortable to meet his eyes. Something was amiss inside Linus. It was more than a vigor, a thing humans find in extenuating situations. It was like he'd lost something along the way. A piece of him was gone, and it was only then that I could see it. "Why are you looking at me like that?" He grinned at me, as though we'd not just witnessed the death of half the godforsaken neighborhood. "No reason." I wiped my nose. Damn cold. I'm just tired. Margaret lifted her axe over her head as she stretched. Wall's too high to climb. It looks like we'll have to go around till we find an opening. There was a pause that hung in the wet air, though I'm not so sure we should. I looked in the general direction. I thought that perhaps we'd enter the cavern and then at the vibrant blue color of the city walls. I don't think we'd make it back if we tried. I could not vouch for the other two, but I was uncertain that I'd be able to walk back through whatever aura protected the place. Not for the first or last time. I silently admonished myself for encouraging Harold. This was a hell of my own design. I brought it on myself, after all. I brought it on us all, Linus. With those wild, mad eyes grinned. Clay's right. Only ways through. That's what we've got to do. It's the only thing that makes sense. In fact, I don't think anything has ever made more sense in this whole crazy world to me. Margaret looked at me, shooting me a glare that told me I probably shouldn't be saying things like that around Linus. But then her shoulders relaxed, and she sighed, puffing up a wild gray strand of hair as she did so before shaking her head. I can't believe I'm saying this, but you're probably right. This is the dumbest thing I've ever done. Nonsense, said Linus. Look at this place. He put his arms up to accentuate his point. It's beautiful. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. How many people do you think have ever seen anything like this before? Too many, said Margaret. A smirk took over Linus's lower face. I'm telling you, he was grinning like a maniac. There was something going on there, but for the life of me, I couldn't figure out what it was. Something was wrong with him. I've read things about the uncanny valley, and I feel as though that's the best way I can describe it. He was no longer the friendly neighborhood barbecue connoisseur. It was like a new thing had jumped into him. And whether it was the dark magic of the place or his own mind that had done it, I don't know till this day. We took off to the right. Following along with the curvature of the city's outer wall, Linus brushed the ends of his fingers intimately over its surface while Margaret and I studied it. The huge open cavern shouldn't have felt so claustrophobic, but it did. The darkness lingering over our heads where the foul creatures hid, clinging to the ceiling, forced my chest to tighten. It felt harder to breathe, or perhaps it was just my clogged nose. I skirted away from the line we'd created as we walked to blow my nostrils open with my finger. Under any other circumstances, I may have been embarrassed, but something told me that we were far beyond that. So many had already died. I glanced at my two traveling companions and hoped I would not have to see any more suffering, but could sense that that was unlikely. I rejoined them, and no one mentioned a thing. They instead opted to stare ahead without saying a word. The three of us had gone perhaps 20 minutes in silence before Margaret began to fall behind, taking slower steps and keeping a distance from us by about 15 yards. What's keeping you back there? Asked Linus. Margaret waved this off. Just not as young and spry as I used to be as home. Nothing to worry about. I think I just need to catch my breath. I went to her and touched her on the shoulder. It's all right. We can take a break if you need to. She latched onto my hand and pulled me close, whispering in my ear, keep an eye on him. I don't trust him. Before I could even respond, she shoved me away. Linus took his hand off the wall and turned completely around. What are you two talking about back there? Margaret offered a smile. Nothing. Clay was just asking me if I needed a break. I'm fine. He raised an eyebrow at the pair of us. Okay. Then he placed his hand on the wall again, possession taking over his steps. It wasn't long till Margaret fell in line with us once again. I couldn't get what she'd said to me out of my mind. Until that point, I'd been worried I was the only one noticing Linus' strange behavior. This should have served to quell the anxieties I had of him, but it only made it so they flourished. I kept him in my line. A patrolling watcher stepped over us, and we stopped to let it pass. I could see them a million times in my dreams, and they would never cease being alien to me. In fact, I have, and they remain that way. The watcher's strange ball briefly lit the high ceiling as it shifted up, and I could see a mess of wicked things. Tightly bound skin and faces sewn in frozen torment served as an appropriate juxtaposition to the Sistine Chapel. Before I could check to see if the faces matched any of the ones we'd left behind, the watcher groaned in its mechanical way and laughed. Linus, I was smiling. Beautiful. A shiver went up my spine. I think I see the entrance up ahead, said Margaret, squinting. I could see she was right. Just around a bend, the wall opened. How long had we been walking? The repetitive nature of our footfalls had long since taken me off to another place like hypnosis, if not for her signaling it. I might have walked right by it. The archway was magnificently tall, constructed from an assortment of cyclopean stones. I was left to wonder exactly what sort of creature could have carved them. I couldn't have imagined the Watchers doing so, urging the massive stone blocks across the ground with their thin legs. No, it seemed to me that there was only one explanation. They were of an ancient imagination, withdrawn from the recesses of a mind far gone. We passed through the archway, only to be met by the ruins of a lost civilization. I was immediately struck by the dizzying way the walkway spun through the spired structures. The streets, if one could call them that, were worn thin as though they'd once been traversed by living beings. My mind went to the Sumerian cities created so long ago, and I wondered if perhaps this was something similar. I knew this not to be the case. No human would have found comfort in that place. No sane human anyhow. The inner side of the wall surrounding the city was onyx black, so dark that I felt if I were to reach out and touch it, I might fall directly into it. Linus whistled up the tall buildings that seemed to have no entryways of their own. It was as though they were nothing more than hollowed-out slabs. Who would construct buildings that could never be used? Have you ever seen anything like this? He asked. No, said Margaret. As we passed by the massive thorny buildings striking up at the ceiling of the cavern, we were cast in shadows. Margaret and I both removed flashlights, but it hardly cut through the blackness ahead. It was a constant fear that something would slither from the darkness and snatch us away to some torturous fate. Thinking of the faces I'd seen in the ceiling, I felt my arms spring alive with goose flesh. Linus caught my uneasiness, and he reached out to pat me on the shoulder. I flinched. Whoa, he said. Calm down there, buddy. There's no reason to be so jumpy. I'm not, I shrugged while turning my attention back to the shadows in front of us. I'm fine. We moved by the first few structures, glancing down the snaking fin alleyways, but deciding in silence to continue our way down the street we were on. Each time we met one of those openings on either side, where the buildings broke open to those dark corners of the city. I could feel unreal eyes on me. I felt so totally vulnerable in those moments, like my lungs might rupture and exhaust all the oxygen from my body. But we pushed on, and the spires opened up to some kind of abandoned market square where flame lights flickered the shadows away. Among the torchlights were booths where people had once sold wares, and I was once again comforted by the fact that some intelligent life had in fact dwelled there sometime in the distant past. In the center of the square was a massive black tower that rose well above all else. Everything was silent but our own steps for a blinking moment. A single fish fell from the sky and landed near the black spire. Linus went to it, and Margaret and I both followed him. He hunkered down over it and prodded it with the end of his index finger, then looked over his shoulder. Again, he asked apparently no one. Linus stood and looked to the black expanse above. We've seen this already, he said, and his voice echoed back at him. Did you hear me? You've already done this. Whether or not Linus summoned what was to follow, I'm unsure. But when I look back on the words I've written so far, I want nothing more than to reach through the words and throttle him. There's no changing the past. A great groaning escaped from somewhere in the shadows of her head, and I half expected the great red tentacle beast from above to come down and make us their playthings. But they didn't show. Instead, shattering glass rained from above. I was left frozen as the shards seemed to materialize from seemingly nothing. I put my arms over my head and hurried to the black spire, hoping to find some cover from the falling glass, but the tower did little. A few darting shards caught my legs, but I felt nothing through the rush of adrenaline. Linus stood in the center of the market, face up. Screaming, his voice could scarcely be heard over the shattering glass. As he twisted around, gripping his face, I could see that a thorn of glass had driven its way into his left eye. Blood rushed down the front of his shirt. Margaret clung to me, and I to her. Shit, 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 she was yelling directly into my ear, eyes clenched shut and fingers digging into my arm. I began feeling around the wall of the flat-sided tower as we inched our way around it. My fingers met an opening, and I pulled Margaret in with me. We fell in, and she scrambled in the dark to withdraw her flashlights while I peered out from the crevice in the tower to scream towards Linus. I saw him dancing in the square with his hands at his face. Over here. Come over here. As the words left my mouth, Linus twisted to face me, and I caught another good look at the gory mess. He lashed a hand onto the shard jutting from his eye, and his fingers slid down the sharpened edge of the glass, cutting his hand and causing it to slip as he attempted to pry it from his face. He latched on with both hands and finally launched the thing from his eye socket. "I did it," he said, torrents of blood rushing from his head. The glass rain didn't let up, and he seemed to not even notice as it diced his exposed arms to flayed ribbons that hung off him in cords, exposing the tissue beneath. Linus, I was too late. A ship's mast fell from the ceiling, landing directly on top of him. It crushed him, and I recoiled back into the dark recesses of the crevice we'd found. My stomach lurched, thinking of the way he'd become no more than a stain. The sound of clinking glass continued, and I dared to peek out once more, ignoring the spot where Linus's raspberry-squashed remains were. There, crashing over the towering structures and sending up plumes of debris and hunks of stone, was the bow of a ship whirling through the air. Margaret looked at me, dark circles forming around her eyes that I'm sure I reciprocated. A handful of short red streaks ran the length of her face where the glass had caught her. A stinging soreness in my own cheeks confirmed that I must have looked much the same. The stress we'd been under was beginning to take its toll. "It's just you and me now," I informed her. The frankness with which I delivered the news scared me. "I know," she sighed. "There's stairs over here." I grabbed her by the shoulders. "We're both gonna make it out of here, are we?" When did I start shaking her? She ripped herself out of my hands. "Play. Damn it. Get off me." I caught her stern expression, but it was quickly replaced by a look of concern. "You're not gonna start acting crazy too, are you?" My shoulders slumped. "No," I shook my head. "I just don't want anyone else to die." Margaret grabbed my face. Her cold, bony hands grounded me. "I'm not gonna die. You're not gonna die, all right?" I was losing my mind. She was right. I couldn't be thinking like that. It would do neither of us any good. She shone her light into the shadows to reveal a plain carved staircase that spiraled up through the center of the spire. I choked out my words. "I don't want to keep going." She shifted the light to shine it on me. I felt very small when she did that. I don't think we have any choice in the matter. The shattering of the glass just beyond the open doorway and the splintering hull of the wooden ship flying through the air drove away my final protest. We were going on, and we had no choice. But to what end? What do we hope to find? There would be no way out. The stairs seemed to go on forever, and it felt as though there was a physical presence pulling me, weighing me down. Margaret's heels kicked high as she ascended the steps ahead of me, with the axe out in front of her chest. Our flashlights illuminated the small space we traveled through. The higher we went in the spire, the closer the walls around us grew, as though the building tapered nearer the top. My chest grew tighter, with my cold working against me. I believe in that climb of the staircase. I became delirious. I tried with my spare hand to feel my forehead, hoping that I'd not come down with a blistering fever, but somehow that felt ridiculous. Who cared if that was the case? I couldn't imagine that it would matter. What had happened if I were to just take a seat on those steps and refuse to continue? With everything in me, I believe I could have taken a seat and died. Wasting away in a dark tower would have been a fate less abominable than the unimaginable horrors beyond. Surely I'm afraid that if I'd not had Margaret ahead of me, pushing on with her wiry, persistent limbs, that may have been what happened. Whatever the opposite of concentration, that's what I found in those lingering dark moments on the stairwell. It became a steady zombie walk of doom where living ceased being a thing, and there was only the movement. The repetition of it lulled me to a place in my mind where things are better. On our way up, we went by slitted openings in the stone like ancient fortress windows that allowed us to look upon the city of twisted buildings. The glass had stopped coming down. I could no longer hear the sound of the ship crashing over rooftops. Somehow the silence was worse. Things would never be the same. I would forever remember that place and those quiet nights. I'd find my eyes going out of focus. Daydreaming would become a thing of the long-forgotten past because I would always be returned there when imagination came. "Are you all right?" asked Margaret, without looking over her shoulder or slowing her pace. "I think so. Just making sure I'm not alone." "I know what you mean." She angled her pace around the middle pillar of the stairwell, ever tightening its bend. "What if there's no end?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if it goes on forever?" "There's always an end." My mind was programmed from a lifetime of constructed narratives that forced a sense of purpose on me and my actions. There's always an end. How do you know? What if we just keep going on forever? Her voice was shaking. "I don't think that's going to happen." I hoped aloud. "That's not how it works. We're going to get out of this, remember? Just like we talked about. You and I will." "I really hope you're right." "I know I am." I said this in the most reassuring way that I could, without actually believing it, even if I wanted to. She stopped. "I think I see it. The opening. It's just up ahead." There was hope in her voice that twisted my entrails. The truth was evident. Beyond her silhouetted shoulder, I could spy dancing warm light. Our pace quickened, and as we broke the surface at the pinnacle of the spire, I slammed into her without meaning to. We were holding hands, not as lovers, but as humans, because we were scared. At the clean, flat spire top that stretched to a diameter of 20 yards, we stood together aghast at the creature there. The unmoving, half-human seeming thing gurgled as its chest rose and fell. It sat in a chair of the same onyx I'd seen on the inner wall of the city, like it was made of a bitter, sick soul. We wagered a few steps toward the thing lined in rows of standing torches. Its eyes were wide open white, forgotten by sunlight, so the pupils and irises had taken on a milky blue quality. The thing's arms were strapped into the chair, black snaking tubes gored into the forearms, frozen hard so that it couldn't move. The opposite ends of the tubes snaked into the ceiling. It stared directly up to the dark shadows or clouds above. Not even its mouth was free of its own cord that no doubt plumbed the depths of its stomach. As we grew nearer, I could see dry tear stains trace the creases of its crow's feet, and its beard was no longer full, but kinked and thin from duress. "Harold," I choked out. The thing in the seat did not respond to my voice. On approach, I could see the reason for this. Its ears had been clogged and locked in place by those same black tubes. "My God," hushed Margaret. We went to Harold then, not knowing what to do. As I touched his cool, naked skin, he seemed to respond in a mumbled groan around the thin tube draped in his throat. Why was I crying? I reached for one of the tubes while Margaret watched me with steady eyes. Neither of us knew what to do, but that wasn't going to stop me from doing what came next. It was a panic that had jumped into my fingers as I clawed at one of the tubes in his left arm. I yanked it, and he let out an awful scream as sludge shot from the place I'd freed the tube, spraying me in the face. I let it fall to the side, totally stunned. What was I going to do? Would he die if I pulled him from the chair? Was he too far gone? Then a whirring began that echoed. The sound of suction filled my ears, and I watched on in horror as the tubes attached to Harold began sucking something out of him. His eyes closed, and he cried whimpering tears. I could not see through the vacant black tubes, and to this day do not know what it drew from him. But when the silence came, it was maddening. Margaret looked at me. She held her hands to her forehead, perpetually swiping her hair back in a frantic manner. "What's happening? My God, what's happening?" And then it began to rain again. No, not rain. It hailed, and thousands of pinking little balls fell from the black sky and rained down on our heads. I closed my eyes and went to Margaret as we tried our best to shield one another from what came, screaming like we screamed in that place so many times already. The twinkling glow caught my eyes as it gathered around our feet, and I could see that the hail wasn't ice or rocks, but they were made of gold. I snapped from my terror and held one of them up to my face. Through squinted eyes, Margaret shouted at me, "What are you doing?" I held up the circle. "They're wedding bands." She opened her eyes and looked through the hole in the center of the ring I was holding. "Why?" I glanced toward Harold. This is his place, I think. What? There are things darker in the human mind than there are out there in space. No dark gods compared to the inner workings of a human mind. The potentiality of our own terribleness cannot be overstated. Those previous sentences are a post-rationalization. At this moment, I couldn't put the words in place like that. I simply shook my head and dropped the ring. I don't know. The rings came down, and I pattered to the opening at the top of the spire towards the way we'd already come. Margaret had been right. There was no end. But I was going to try, even if it killed me. Her fingers dug into my arm and whipped me around. We can't leave him. She glanced over at the thing in the chair, still sputtering, gasping for air around the tube fixed in his lips. Not like that. There was a pause before she looked back at me. I wouldn't want to be left like that, would you? I looked at the axe in her hand. How is it that she kept it so long through everything? Not like that. We can't do it like that. We were screaming to one another over the clinking of the metal ring. What choice is there? Her fingers tightened around the handle of the axe. We could do it quickly. I looked at the pitiful Harold and nodded. She moved quickly. It was a task no one wanted a part in, and the faster it was over, the better. Margaret launched the axe into his chest with a quick heave. His body lurched and spasmed before going still. She ripped the axe away, and blood sprayed as his chest opened wide. The wedding rings stopped falling, with the last few ringing out somewhere far away. All was quiet, with Margaret covered in Harold's blood like it was war paint. The cavern air changed. There was nothing. We were standing in a vacuum that might crush us at any moment. Then the world began crumbling. A cave-in was my initial thought. But this was ridiculous, of course. Cave-ins didn't happen in places that didn't exist. Such tragedies were for the real world. We parted there so long ago. The world was shaking, and the spire trembled, threatening to give away at any moment. The rumbling was all I could hear. Margaret screeched out something, but I couldn't understand. She hung onto the edge of one of the tubes attached to Harold's body. She was waving at me. I stumbled over and fell onto my knees, trying to crawl to her. Her mouth moved. But as I tried deciphering what she was saying, a great boulder fell from the sky and sheared away the opening of the stairwell behind me. I twisted around on my back to watch it fall away as spider crack lines shot in my direction. I'm certain I was screaming as I moved. I felt a pair of ice-cold hands on my neck and craned around to see Margaret. She screamed over the roar of the falling debris. I can see light. She pointed in the most unexpected of directions. She pointed at Harold's chest. She shifted to the front of him that had been pried open by the axe. I watched, dumbfounded, as she pushed her fingers into his chest and opened them more. Indeed, natural light spilled from there. I was immediately reminded of the mumbles of my dead neighbors. The only way was through, so they said. Margaret placed her knee on his thigh and ripped his chest open. I crawled over on shaking arms and pulled myself up to gander in. It was a dream that I could see trees and perhaps even a touch of real air. I'm not proud of this. I pushed my fist into him and began worming my way through. Freedom was so close that I could nearly taste it. Swimming the visceral ooze in the place between here, and there is a feeling I will never wash clean. Digging my claws in, I propelled myself forward like a deranged newborn pulling itself free from its tense mother. There was no longer Harold or Margaret or even me. There was only the ravenous growing urge to escape, and I kicked my way through intestines until I tugged away at clumps of dirt and took in labored breaths of fresh air. The sun splintered overhead as I sat choking in the open hole of Harold's front yard. I hawked up a lump of wet mud and scooted onto my knees to peer into the place I'd come from. There was no opening leading back there anymore. In its place, there was only a grouping of loose dirt. I watched and waited and was all alone. I wept and swiped tears away with dry, cracked hands. "Come on," I said at the pile. "Come on." The words spit from my mouth. The dirt remained still, with no trace of life. Please, I begged whatever it was that had created such a cruel world. I screamed like a madman. It started out small. The pebbles of minuscule, bald clay fell away, and rolled like children down a grassy hill. A finger with splintered, caked nails sprang forth, and then came the whole hand and the forearm. I wrapped my hand around a thin wrist and tugged with everything I had. Then Margaret's head sprang forth, hair clinging to her head. She gasped, mouth open and eyes closed. Once she was free, she wiped at her face. After a brief coughing fit, where she put her head between her knees as I patted her on the back, she began crying. "We made it," I said. The elation in my voice reached the point of absurdity. "There's no reason for that anymore. We made it." She looked at me. I know. Margaret patted the dust off her shirt. "There was a time there. I saw your feet just above my head. I saw you kicking. You were going to make it. Then I felt something grab me from behind, and I was stuck. Then your feet disappeared, and I couldn't move anymore. I almost died. I could feel whatever it was squeezing the life out of me. There was a thought I had, though." I looked at her puzzled. "At least you were going to make it." That's what I thought. That'd be something, at least. "Margaret, I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't." We sat there, curled together on that spot in the bottom of the pit for too long. There was an investigation into the matter by the police. You can't have half a neighborhood disappear without it raising a few eyebrows. Neither me nor Margaret told the whole story, but the police received what we knew they believed. There was a mania caught among the crowd of people gathered in Harold's front yard, and we couldn't stop digging. We told them that much, and that much was enough. The official records said that we were the victims of hysteria. We told them of a cave-in, and that most of the people that were caught in it. They excavated the lot Harold's house stood on and never found a thing. I never figured they would. We each got our share of fines and community service. In the courtroom, I recall the judge sneering at me from her high chair as I plead my case. There was jail time for me, but Margaret's lawyer was better. She visited me sometimes. It was time well spent in comparison to what I'd seen. When I got out, Margaret introduced me to her granddaughter as me and the old lady who once jogged around the neighborhood grew closer. And I came to realize her granddaughter was all she had left. It finally made sense to me that her last request would have something to do with her. We don't talk about that place often, but when we do, it always ends in long nights where we chat over 4 or 5 bottles of wine or whatever else is nearby. She's a fair amount older than I am, and I know that I'll be the last, unless by some miracle the old bird outlives us all. Given what she's capable of, I would believe it's possible. I joke like that to make it seem far and away. Do not let this serve as some fable of morals or fault. It was never about blame, anyhow. This was about one man's inability to let go of the past. There's a world under our world. It's where monsters come from and where they're supposed to stay. I think something just got out and it's following me. It happened at the subway. It was 8:30 a.m. on a Friday. I was stuck in my usual morning commute. My eyes were glued to my phone as I waited for the train. I wasn't really paying attention to my surroundings. I was more interested in the emails from work. After I replied to a few, I glanced up to check the timetable. My train would be arriving in less than 5 minutes. Then movement on the tracks caught my eye. The platform was a little crowded, but I was pretty much at the front of the line. I had a clear view of the train tracks, and I could see someone down there. They looked like they were pacing. They were walking slowly up and down the line. I stepped forward to get a better look. I couldn't really make out their features from here. They wore a shapeless gray jacket with a huge hood pulled over their face. Their ratty pants were dirty, white, and full of holes. I could see they were barefoot too. Probably a homeless person then. I felt bad. The poor guy definitely looked lost. "Hey, you okay?" I called him. The guy didn't even look up. He did slow down, though. His movements were still jerky and awkward. I raised my voice a bit. Maybe he hadn't heard me. "Hey man, the train's coming pretty soon. You should probably get out of there." I saw a few people near me move forward and look down the tracks as well, probably to see who I was talking to. Good. They could help me coax him out. Still no response from the guy. A tinny canned announcement blared from the speakers overhead. It said the next train is bound for Brookside Station. Please stay behind the yellow line. That meant he had 3 minutes and 30 seconds to get out of there. Worried, I stepped to the edge of the platform and squatted down to get closer to him. Hey, the train's almost here, man, I said. This time, he stopped walking. I sighed in relief and I stretched out my arm towards him. Come on, grab my hand. I'll give you a boost, all right? I told him, but he didn't move. I frowned and tried to get closer, leaning further past the platform. I could hear the people around me reacting, but the guy didn't even turn around. Maybe he was drunk. I quickly checked my watch. I glanced down the subway just to confirm that the train wasn't here yet, and then I jumped down from the platform and landed on the tracks. I heard some screams from the crowd, but I just ran over to the homeless guy and grabbed his arm. Work with me, man, I said. I shook his arm a bit, hoping that would snap him out of whatever daze he was in. The train's gonna be here in less than 3 minutes, okay? We gotta go. I told him. When he still didn't move, I started pulling him towards the platform. Thankfully, he wasn't fighting my hold, but man, he was pretty heavy for a skinny homeless guy. Definitely not the 90-pound lightweight I was expecting. Still, I could handle him. The crowd seemed to be full-on panicking now. We were definitely moving a lot slower than I would have liked, but I felt we could make it. I could probably get him out with a fireman's carry once we were close enough to the platform. Almost there. Suddenly, though, the guy dug his heels in. We came to an abrupt stop. Hey, I said. I yanked him a little harder. This is no time to stop, dude. The guy was heavier and stronger than he looked. I leveraged my own weight to lift him up, but he was not budging. I grunted and went to walk around him, hoping I'd have more success pushing instead of pulling. Before I could move, though, he turned to look at me. I almost expected an apology. What I didn't expect was a wide smile showing jagged, yellow teeth, pale, cracked lips stretched on pasty, plastic-like skin. Long strands of stringy black hair framed a face, looking at me from beneath the hood. The features I could see almost looked feminine. They stared at me with one red, bloodshot eye. I jerked back a little, shocked. The girl's grin seemed too large for her face. It looked unnatural. The one eye I could see was large and unblinking. Why the hell was she grinning? We had about a minute left before the train arrived, probably less even. I heard someone yell from the platform, telling me to hurry up and get out of there. I'm trying, I muttered under my breath. I grabbed the girl again and tried to pick her up. Come on, come on, a loud electric ping sounded overhead, signaling another announcement. The announcement said it was now arriving. Train to Brookside Station. This train to Brookside Station, mind gap. We were out of time. I bent down and prepared to lift her up. That was the only way I could get us both on the platform. And then suddenly, I felt hands clamp on my shoulders. Next thing I knew, I was back on the platform. I glanced around, a little disoriented. Dozens of people were staring at me, their faces all varying with levels of alarm and concern. 2 big guys stood next to me, probably the ones who'd pulled me out, but I didn't see the homeless girl. What the hell were you doing? One of the guys demanded. I whipped around to look at the tracks. She was still there, grinning up at me. There's still someone down there, I said. We have to. The train rushed past me, cutting me off with a loud screech. That was too late. There was a kid down there. We ought to call 911. Someone was on the tracks, I said. Yeah, you were, the other guy began. You were on the tracks. We got you out. Not me. I shot back. The homeless girl, the one with the gray jacket. Why the hell did you leave her? Over the line, I heard a click. 911. What's your emergency? Yes, we need help. I began. I'm at Redstone Station. Somebody was on the tracks. We couldn't get him out before the train arrived, and I don't think she made it. The operator started asking me questions to get more details. I answered as best I could. The noise around me was almost deafening as word began to spread of the girl. 2 hours later, I was standing on the same station platform, looking in disbelief at the cop in front of me. He sighed and repeated what I knew couldn't possibly be the truth. Well, search and rescue combed these tracks from top to bottom, sir, the officer told me. He was young, maybe my age, and he had a stupid-looking goatee that did nothing to hide his baby face. There were other cops walking around, talking to other passengers and taking statements. Some cops were shining their flashlights down on the tracks, the apparently empty subway tracks. Yeah, no sign of a body alive, injured or otherwise, he continued. I opened my mouth to clarify, but he kept talking. You know, our team just finished reviewing the footage. We're going to go through them again just to be sure, but you were the only one on those train tracks in the last 24 hours. That's impossible, I interrupted. There was a homeless kid. I saw him. Why the hell do you think I jumped on the tracks? Goatee looked at me for a moment and then spoke again. You know, this isn't a harmless prank, sir. You initiated an emergency train stop and phoned in false information to 911. These are very punishable offenses, and I need you to come with us. Wait, what? Why would I joke about this? Someone needed help, I said. Yeah, well, we have multiple witnesses claiming you jumped from the platform unprompted. Goatee continued, then proceeded to ignore instructions to get out. Also have the recording of your 911 call informing the responder that someone was on the tracks when the train arrived. Yeah, no shit, because there was someone on the tracks, I said. I tried to get him out, but two guys pulled me up before I could, and that's why I placed the call. Idiot. Goatee held up a hand. Whoa, sir, we're gonna have to ask you to come with us. Look, check again, I began. I know what I saw. All right. She wore a gray jacket. And sir, the officer interrupted. I'm only going to ask this one more time. Please come with us. I wanted to fight back. The fact that they thought I would joke about something like this made me sick, but the look on Goatee's face told me it wasn't worth arguing. So I just nodded and followed into one of the cruisers parked outside the station. Luckily, they didn't slap cuffs on me. The drive to the station was uneventful. The actual interrogation was long, repetitive, and lasted almost 2 hours. I lost track of time as I repeated this morning's event to every officer who came in to question me over and over again. Now I've watched enough movies to know that the mirror next to me was a one-way window. I knew that there were people on the other side trying to decide if I was a liar, a troublemaker, or just batshit crazy. I scowled at the mirror. Someone had been down there. The cops just hadn't looked hard enough. There were service tunnels that led to the tracks, right? For, repairs and stuff. Maybe the girl had managed to crawl into one of them in time. Search and rescue just needed to find her. And then my story would make sense. They'd know I wasn't messing around or playing a prank. The door to the interrogation room opened again. In walked the same officer who brought me in. Same stupid goatee on that same stupid face. I didn't bother hiding my glare. Call me petty, but I did not like that guy. He told me that they couldn't detain me for more than 24 hours while the investigation was ongoing, since I'd already given my statement, and had shown willingness to cooperate. They were going to let me go. Well, that was a relief, but the investigation is still ongoing, Goatee began. Right now, all evidence points towards willful tampering of emergency systems. If we gather enough for a case, you'll have to file an appeal, maybe even go to court. Did you just say go to court? I asked. Are you serious? You initiated a full-scale emergency at the station for no reason, he reminded me. There was someone on the tracks, I shot back. Well, search and rescue still hasn't found a body, he replied. Then they're obviously not looking hard enough, I said. Goatee gave me a sharp look at that. Okay, look, the only reason you aren't in an overnight cell right now is good behavior, he began. I suggest you don't jeopardize that, sir. Yeah, whatever, dude, I said, standing up. We're done. I can go now. He nodded. Yeah, we called your emergency contact. Miss Natalie Wakefield is waiting for you in the lobby. By the time Natalie and I got back to my apartment, it was dark out. Natalie, my girlfriend, has always been the babbling type. She babbled when she was excited, when she was nervous, and when she was overwhelmed. So I was genuinely surprised that she managed to stay quiet the entire ride home. But the moment we stepped through the door, she started firing off questions. Natalie had apparently been at work when she got the call. All they told her was that I'd been brought in for questioning. Then, when she got to the station, no one gave her the details of my case. So I knew why she was asking so many questions. Heck, if I was in her place, I'd be demanding answers too. But I was exhausted. I wanted to crawl into bed and just forget all this. Hey, I said, cutting her off with a gentle squeeze of her arm. She immediately shut up. Look, I really appreciate you picking me up, Nat. I continued. Really? But it's been a long day. Can we just talk about this tomorrow, please? Right, she said quickly. Of course. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. Of course you'd be tired. You want me to make you some tea to help you sleep? I was pretty sure I could collapse right there. And then, no tea required. Still, she meant well. I nodded and managed to smile. Sure, thanks. Just bring it to the room when it's ready. Okay? I'm gonna go to bed. She nodded and went to the kitchen, and that's when something caught my attention. The bathroom door right between the kitchen and the bedroom was slightly open, and there in the space between the door and the frame, I saw something standing in the darkness. I instinctively grabbed Natalie and pushed her behind me to protect her. Get back, I whispered. I looked more closely at the figure. Was that? It was the girl from the subway. She stared back at me with that one wide, bloodshot eye. Her skin was the same bluish gray I'd seen earlier. Unnaturally smooth like plastic. Great. I had tried to help a crazy person. Well, at least she wasn't dead. I gently but firmly pushed Natalie towards the direction of the bedroom, making sure she was behind me. Nat, I said, go to the bedroom and lock the door. Call 911 and let them know somebody broke in. In the corner of my eye, I saw a hardbound book I'd been reading. I quickly picked it up. It wasn't much of a weapon, but whatever. Broke in, Natalie repeated. She tried to push past me. I quickly moved to cover her again. I glared at the girl in the gap, daring her to move. The corner of her thin lips jerked upwards in response, like she was about to smile. Just get to the bedroom and lock the door, I repeated. I'll handle this, Jason. Seriously, cut it out, Natalie said. Why was she being so difficult? Anyway, I couldn't risk losing track of the girl, so I moved forward. I was ready to tackle her. I did remember that she was much stronger than she looked, though. I had at least a foot of height over her, though. I could grab her and hold her until Natalie called the cops. What are you doing? Natalie said, there's no one there. I shook her off and moved forward. Natalie made a furious, confused noise and darted around me. She sprinted towards the bathroom. I tried to grab her. The crazy in the bathroom didn't seem interested in her, thank God, because she was still staring straight at me. But I didn't know what she was capable of, and I didn't want Natalie to risk provoking her. Before I could grab Natalie, she reached the bathroom door and shoved it open, strong enough that it hit the wall with a bang. Then she shot her arm into the darkness and hit the light switch. Warm orange light flooded out. The girl was nowhere to be seen. I was shocked. The bathroom was totally empty. Jason, Natalie began. You see this, right? You see that there's no one here, right? I couldn't argue. I couldn't even reason this out. Our bathroom's small, barely enough for 2 people, and it doesn't have a window. The only possible exit is the air vent, and that's only about 1.5 feet wide. No way in hell was an adult human being squeezing through that thing. I started to say something, and then stopped. Confused, didn't even begin to cover what I felt. Natalie was starting to look less pissed and more concerned. I shook my head, hoping to clear it. I'm sorry, I mumbled, taking her hand. I'm sorry. I thought I could have sworn. You know it. It looks so real. She squeezed my hand comfortingly. It's okay, she said softly. I'm sorry for freaking out too. You've had a stressful day. Yeah, I laughed dryly. That's one way to put it. And you're too tired to talk about this right now, she continued. Let's just get some sleep, okay? Before we both start seeing things. She gestured again at the very empty bathroom. I stared at it for a few more seconds, a little hurt by the dig, but not enough to start something. Not after the day I'd had. I was tired. We both were. And look, she was right. I sighed and shut the bathroom door. That was right. There was nothing there. I wish it had stayed that way, because the next time I saw her, she was looking at me from between our closet doors. This was Saturday, the day after the shit show at the train station. I'd managed a solid 10 hours of sleep. Nat had cooked up a huge breakfast for me. I was fed, well rested, and in the familiar comfort of my own home, so I couldn't pretend I was tired and seeing things. She was right there. Natalie had been rooting through that very closet only a few minutes earlier, looking for a coat. She was running late for lunch with her friends, so when she found what she was looking for, she didn't bother to close the doors properly, just swung them shut as best she could and dashed out with a "see you later" Jason thrown over her shoulder. I followed her out, locked the door behind her, and headed back to the bedroom. And then I stopped short in the doorway, and I stared in disbelief at the girl in the closet. There was no mistaking it. She was the one I tried to save at the subway, and she'd broken into our home last night. Through the sliver of space between the closet doors, I could make out the same plastic skin, the same dark hair, the same bloodshot. What the hell? I said. The girl in the closet kept watching me. How the hell did you get in here? I demanded, hoping a little anger would scare her. What do you want? She said nothing. I thought about the gun in my bedside drawer, something I kept just in case. But if she saw me getting a weapon, she might attack. I didn't want to just shoot her. She was clearly not right in the head. I couldn't even begin to imagine what sort of drug she was on, but I didn't know what the hell she was going to do either. And then I remembered Natalie's baseball bat. My eyes darted to the corner of our bedroom, and sure enough, the bat was there, propped up against a few boxes. Again, look, I didn't want to hurt this girl, but I did want to scare her. I wanted her to get out and not come back. When we first moved in together, I had insisted Natalie have some sort of weapon just in case of a break-in or robbery. She hated guns, so as a compromise, I bought her a steel bat. I dove for it. Adrenaline had me moving faster than I thought possible. Less than a second later, I was raising it threateningly over my head as I glared at her. Okay, enough. Get out, I told her. Nothing. She didn't move, didn't reply, didn't even twitch in surprise. She just continued staring at me. And then, after a few seconds of silence, she grinned. And that was it for me. I moved across the room, pulled the closet doors open, and I went to grab her and pull her out. But she was gone. I can't tell you exactly how she disappeared. I don't think I'll ever have the words to describe it. She didn't pop out of existence like a bubble. She didn't fade away either. It was like something being erased. It was like she was there, and then she simply wasn't. I spent another minute searching the closet, pushing aside coats and jackets and dresses for any hint that something had been there. When it became painfully obvious that I wasn't going to find anything, I shut the doors and left the apartment. I didn't see the girl again until Monday at work. I don't know how she followed me. I was in the lobby of our building, waiting for the elevator to my office on the 18th floor. I was in a pretty deep discussion with my colleague about our latest hires, so I didn't notice the elevator had arrived until I heard it ding. We paused our conversation to watch the doors slide open so we could gauge how full the lift was. The now familiar sheen of blue-gray skin and yellow, jagged teeth brought me up short. There, in the middle of the elevator, was the girl from the station, and she was looking right at me. And then a split second later, she was gone, just like in the closet. She was there, and then she simply wasn't. The elevator door slid open fully to reveal 4 guys in suits. As I stared at them, they looked back at me in obvious confusion. My coworker asked if I was okay, and I couldn't reply. I decided to take the stairs. On Tuesday, I got called back to the police station when I got there. Goatee, of all people, put me back in the interrogation room. You know, your little stunt held up the rest of the trains for at least an hour, he told me. Threw a lot of people's schedules off. You know, they want someone to blame. And since no one comes forward to back up your little story, we're ready to pull search and rescue off this case. Confirmed false alarm. You, buddy, are looking at a very hefty fine or a state hearing. You know what? Possibly both. I looked back at him in shock. I thought someone needed help. I began. What? Was I supposed to sit back and let the train run someone over? That's how things work for you. And my God, dude, would you relax about the damn train schedule? Trains get held up all the time. All right, welcome to the real world, pal. Goatee looked back at me. Well, there's a huge difference between wanting to help and actually helping, he began. You don't get plus points for trying a real world. He did air quotes when he said real world. Actual, honest-to-God air quotes. He looked ridiculous. He was also a huge prick. I wanted to say so, but I held my tongue. He was still the officer handling my case, and I couldn't antagonize him too much. And it's not just about stopping the train, he insisted. Like we told you, you can't just go around making prank calls to 911, buddy. That is tampering with public emergency systems. Okay, so why am I here? I asked. Since you think I made it all up, right? Our guys are reviewing the security footage again, he began. And we need to know where to look. Believe it or not, we do want to be thorough. If there's someone down on the tracks, we want to find him. So he asked for my story again. I think he was looking for inconsistencies. That's what they do, right? When cops think you're lying, they make you tell your story a dozen times until you mention something new or you describe something differently. And then they got you. But I knew I wasn't lying, so I told Goatee the same story I told him and the other officers last week. He didn't look convinced, but he didn't look skeptical either. Maybe I was imagining it, but he almost looked concerned. I couldn't be sure, though, because his goatee was in the way. He stood up. All right, I need to grab other witness statements, he began. Stay here and I'll be back in a few minutes, all right? He walked out of the interrogation room, leaving me to my thoughts. I rubbed my eyes. I was so tired, and it was only Tuesday. I was still reeling from what I'd seen the past few days. I didn't know what to make of it, and I didn't know where to begin. Then I raised my head and froze. She was there. Goatee hadn't closed the door the whole way. I could see her standing just outside it, staring at me through the crack. I jumped to my feet, full fight or flight. Her eyes darted up, tracking me, but she didn't move, didn't even twitch. Just continued tracking me with her eye as I slowly moved around the table. I wanted to look around for anything I could use as a weapon, but I also didn't want to take my eyes off her. Would she disappear again? Would she stay? Will Goatee come back in time to see me attacking her? Suddenly the door swung open, and just like that, she was gone again. An older cop stepped through the door. He had deep frown lines, even deeper laugh lines, and a full head of salt and pepper hair. His eyes were a clear, startling blue. Hey there, he said. His voice was gruff, but not unkind. The interrogation's not over, I'm afraid. I'm gonna need you to sit back down, right? I replied. Only I couldn't. I felt like I'd be vulnerable if I did. The girl was probably still here. The old cop raised an eyebrow. Something wrong with the chair, son. I shook my head and forced myself to sit back down, even though my instincts all but screamed that I couldn't relax here. Where's the other guy? I asked. Oh, you mean Summers? The old cop said, taking the seat across from me. I got pulled over by forensics. He'll be back, though. Summers. His name is Summers, I asked, still trying to calm myself down. Yeah, it's on his badge, he replied. Doesn't suit him, I muttered back. The old cop grinned. His eyes were shining with amusement. Yeah, that is true, isn't it? What? You had a better name for him. In my head, I was actually calling him Goatee, I said. The old cop barked a laugh. It was short but deep, like he genuinely found it funny. I felt a lot better with that laugh. Goatee, how you know I like that? I just might start using that. See if I can get it to stick. Are you handling my case too? I asked. I figured he was. Why else would he be talking to me? Not in my jurisdiction. I'm just a traffic cop, he replied. Oh, my son, a bit disappointed. It looked like it was just me and a goatee. The door was open, and I saw you moving around inside. Figured you were feeling antsy, cooped up in here all alone. I thought I'd keep you some company, he said. Before I could ask more questions, the door swung open again. Goatee stepped inside, clutching a fairly thick folder in one hand. In the other, he held a small styrofoam cup of what looked like fresh coffee. If he was surprised by the old cop's appearance, he did not show it. He simply slapped the folder onto the table and took a sip of his drink. The old cop stood up. "And that's my cue," he said. He turned to leave, nodding once in my direction. "You ever need help with a parking ticket, son? You come find me, okay? Thanks. And don't worry about this upstart." He continued, clapping Goatee on the shoulder. Goatee jumped, almost spilling his coffee. He's all bark, no bite. You know how it is. Goatee glared back at him. "You want to go, old man?" he asked. The other cop just chuckled. "Oh, easy there, little fella." He opened the door and stepped out. Goatee muttered something under his breath, and seeing him annoyed was gratifying. I bit back a grin. "I hate that guy," he muttered. It wasn't until I got home that night that I felt like there'd been something strange about that old cop. On Wednesday, I walked in on Nat moving furniture around in the living room. She bought a walking pad 2 weeks ago. It had just arrived that morning, and she was trying to find a good spot. I quickly changed out of my suit and put on some ratty house clothes so I could help her. But when I walked back into the living room, I saw that girl again, and she was grinning at me. Long strands of stringy hair framed what I could see of her face. Natalie had pushed the couch away from its original corner in an attempt to make room for the pad, and the girl was somehow wedged in the small space between the wall and the couch, looking up at me with a smile. This was impossible. Natalie, flitting around, laughing as she tugged the coffee table this way and that, told me everything I needed to know. She couldn't see this girl. Only I could. I shoved the couch back until it hit the wall. The space and the thing crouching in it just disappeared. The next day, I was a wreck. Natalie definitely noticed. She cooked me an extra big breakfast and admitted that she was concerned. Apparently, I was distant, jumpy. Considering that I was typically a very chill, even-tempered guy, I could see why this worried her. I lied, and I told her I was just worried about the ongoing investigation. It was partly true anyway. She knew about what happened at the train station already. I told her the full story the day after, and she was just as confused as I was. She bought it, assured me that search and rescue would find something, or that someone would come forward and back up my story. I smiled, hoping it came off as genuine, and I thanked her. She told me to go hang out with my friends, do something to take my mind off the case, and I took her advice. I went out with my co-workers that night. One of them said they knew a great bar. I didn't care if they served nothing but cold pizza and shitty beer. I was desperate for something normal, something to distract me from the very real possibility that I was losing my mind. I walked up to the bar to get the first round of drinks started, but had to stop halfway because I saw her lying there squeezed beneath the counter. She looked up at me with a wide eye and an even wider grin. I turned and walked right out of the bar. I made it about a block before I broke into a run. I was trying to stay calm and sensible, but what the hell was I supposed to do? I didn't know what this was and why I was the only one who could see it. I don't know why this thing wouldn't just leave me alone. I just knew I couldn't live my life like this. Tense, paranoid, constantly looking over my shoulder for that thing. I needed to do something to try and fix this, but I didn't know how. It was Friday again. I was heading to work, still on edge. A train rolled into the station. The overhead speakers came to life, confirming this was my train. I fell in line with the other commuters, waiting for passengers to get off so we could get on. Now boarding, the tinny robotic recording said cheerfully. Passengers bound for Brookside Station. This train to Brookside Station. I looked down as I boarded the train, careful not to trip. But she was there too, grinning up at me from the space between the platform and the train, her wide eyes red and strained. I could see the edges of yellow, jagged teeth poking out from thin, cracked lips. The announcement ended with the usual warning. "Mind the gap," it said. I stared down at her as everything fell into place. Yes, is that how she was following me? The people behind me pushed onto the train. I made my way to an empty spot, my eyes never leaving the gap, and the girl in it looking right at me. Her grin grew wider, almost like she knew that I'd finally figured it out. I spent the rest of the day in absolute mess. Search and rescue wouldn't find a body on the tracks because they were right. There wasn't a person down there, just a thing with bloodshot eyes, plastic skin, and yellow, jagged teeth. I ran the possibilities over in my mind. Why was I the only one who could see her? Even the first time on the tracks, no one else had seen her but me. Did she just choose to appear to me? Was I just unlucky? Or had I messed around with something I wasn't supposed to? To make matters worse, I was called back to the police station the next day. Probably for Goatee to yell at me more for delaying the trains. Looks like I was paying that fine after all, because my case was a lost cause. She was obviously something unnatural. No one else could see her. I really had initiated an emergency train stop for no reason. All because I'd been trying to help some sick, twisted creature that didn't need it. God, that's probably why she keeps grinning at me, laughing at the absolute mess my life has become because of her, and I didn't know how to get rid of her. When I arrived, Goatee escorted me to a different room this time. It had more furniture than the other one, but was still very bare bones. Just a desk, 3 chairs, an old fan, and an old filing cabinet. Wow, an upgrade, I muttered sarcastically. I couldn't help it. You know, I do miss the old mirror, though. Goatee shot me an annoyed look. All right, take a seat, he told me. CJ will be here shortly. CJ, I repeated, sitting down. The hell's CJ? Goatee pushed a manila envelope over to me, still annoyed. CJ's the reason all charges against you were dropped, he shot back. Sidewatched the attitude. I frowned, confused. You're officially cleared of all charges, Goatee clarified. No fine, no court hearing, not even a mark on your public record. Congratulations. I sat there and looked at him. What? Goatee smirked. Well, you dealt with a freaking demon peering at you from tiny spaces the whole week, he said. And this is what breaks you. I didn't want to sound like a broken record, so I kept my mouth shut, but I sure as shit kept staring at him because what? What did he say? The door to the office swung open, and the old traffic cop from last week stepped in. Santos from Search and Rescue called in that favor we owe him, he said in lieu of a greeting. Goatee groaned. What already? He complained. It's been 2 weeks. Yeah, well, Holy Dweller in the old hotel on 6th, the old cop replied with a shrug. Come on, you know how it is. Goatee sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. My God, that place needs to be condemned, he said. The old traffic cop turned to me and gave me a cheerful grin. You're looking mighty confused, son. He patted my shoulder and took the other chair. I didn't trust myself to speak, so I just looked at him. He nodded at the envelope in front of me. Now that there is the official report for your case, he began. Now you can read it if you want, but I'll help you cut through all the legal crap. Now basically, the emergency train stop called last week, Friday, was ruled as mass hysteria. There weren't enough witness statements to accurately detail the events that occurred. I was hearing what he was saying, but the words weren't fully sinking in. Not enough witnesses. The train had been full of people, and the witness statements that were documented were so full of inconsistencies and inaccuracies. The investigators agreed that none of them could be used objectively, he continued. CCTV footage shows nothing out of the ordinary either, right? I croaked out because I felt like I had to say something. The old cop winked at me. So nobody was hurt, no bodies found, and no substantial evidence. The higher-ups have written it off as mass hysteria and don't think it's prudent to pin the blame on one person. Yeah, like I said, Goatee cuts and sound. The board officially cleared. This was the first piece of good news I've gotten in weeks. I should have punched the air in victory. I should have yelled. I told you so in Goatee's face. Heck, I should have taken the old-timer's hand and shook it vigorously. And I would have had Goatee's earlier statement not been replaying in my head in an annoying, persistent loop. You said demon. I croaked out, turning to look at Goatee. Before the older cop came in, you said peering at you from tiny spaces. The old cop groaned. Really, Summers? Goatee snickered. Yeah, I couldn't help it. You should have seen him gaping like a goldfish. The old cop smacked the back of his head. I'm sorry about him, he sighed. And he sounded genuinely apologetic. He forgets how to be human sometimes, he continued. I don't know what my expression was at that moment, but it made the old timer pause. He reached over the table and clapped a hand on my shoulder again. Gentle but firm, grounding. All right, well, I'm going to explain everything as best as I can now, son. You think you can take it, or you want to take a break first? Break, I thought. I wanted nothing more, but I needed to know. I needed everything to start making sense. So I shook my head. Yeah, no, just lay it on me, I managed to say. Don't know where I got the bravado, but I think I sounded convincing enough. The old cop looked pleased, at least. Alrighty, then. First things first. The name's CJ-san. He held out his hand for me to shake. It's very nice to meet you. You got the charges against me dropped, I said. Goatee here said so earlier. I looked over at him. I don't think he liked his new nickname, but CJ cut him off before he could say anything. Yeah, it was easy, he said with a little wink. Especially since no one was hurt. The department was ready to close the case on day one, actually slap you with a fine for messing with emergency systems and be done with it. But I didn't think it was right to make you pay for anything. I mean, you were innocent. Besides, we needed more time. We had to keep the case open until we knew what we were dealing with. I repeated. CJ chuckled. Sure, the shit we face, son. It's not the kind of shit you can face alone. What shit, I wanted to ask, but the old cop held up a hand to stop me. That's a story for another time, he said. Let's focus on the witch in the wardrobe first. For the first time in what felt like decades, I managed to crack a small smile. Not just in the wardrobe, I replied. Well, that is correct. Everywhere there's a gap. In fact, we don't have the conditions down to an exact science, but we do know a few, CJ confirmed. He held up his hand and started ticking off his fingers. We know lighting doesn't matter to her. Neither does the time of day. She's not bothered by the sun, and she sure as shit doesn't need to wait till night. I remember the elevator at work, our living room. Heck, this very police station. Bloodshot eyes staring at me from impossibly small spaces at random times of the day, and that mocking yellow grin, CJ continued. We've seen her pop up in gaps as thin as my finger, but any space wider than a hand span doesn't count. I guess the little lady's shy. Oh wait, so you don't need to close the gap for her to disappear, I realized. You just have to make it not the gap. Yep, CJ began. Swing a door wider, pull curtains further apart, or slam shut. Whatever you gotta do to get rid of her. For a dweller of her status, she's actually pretty limited. Dweller, I repeated. I was so out of my depth. What we call the creatures like her, CJ continued. Because they dwell in them. Yeah, never mind. He waved his hand like he was waving the conversation away. Another story for another time. Have you ever seen her full face? Blowed it out. Look, at this point, I knew, all right. I knew they knew. We were discussing the thing that had been following me, driving me crazy for the past week, like it was something normal. Just some guy swapping tips on an unnatural entity that could only manifest in gaps. Obviously, they knew what I'd been dealing with, but I needed them to spell it out for me. I needed to know that I wasn't alone anymore. Because that's what had scared me the most this past week. Not the fact that I could see her, but the fact that I was the only one who could. Can't say I have, CJ replied. Always just one red, veiny eye, bit of what's left of her nose, and half of that damn smile. And this, more than anything, was proof of the way CJ described her. It wasn't the vague, abstract description of someone who just watched a video or read some notes. It was a description that came from first-hand experience. My God, so you can see her too, I said. She is real. Oh, she's real, I write Goatee cut in. A real pain in the paperwork, I can tell you that. Once we realized you were serious about seeing someone on the tracks. We had an idea of what we were dealing with. Went to check the station after it closed for the night, just to be sure. And once you see her, well, you can't really unsee her. She's latched onto you, though, so you're the only one she'll haunt outside the subway. Goatee said, Wait, so what you're saying is I trailed off. Not really sure how to put it, but CJ got it. You want proof you're not crazy, don't you? There you go. Certified officers of the law telling you you're not crazy. Very unlucky, yes, but crazy. He shook his head. No more than him or I. The validation washed over me, as sudden and refreshing as a bucket of cold water on a hot day. I slumped down in my chair and exhaled. I had a million things I wanted to say, but I settled for a soft, okay. You should have seen your face, Goatee began. When I told you we didn't find a body, CJ chuckled good naturally and added, proudly looked like he'd seen a ghost. You knew, I accused him this whole time. You knew what I saw, but you arrested me anyway. Nah, come on, we just detained her. Goatee corrected me. And look, I had to. Technically speaking, there really was nothing down there. CJ clapped a hand on my shoulder. We have to keep up appearances, He at least sounded apologetic. But Goatee was not getting off my list anytime soon. We're already risking a lot with what we do, CJ continued. Tampering with evidence, forgetting to file witness statements. It's a lot. So why do we take so long to contact you, son? We wanted to get the charges dropped, but we had to make sure nothing could get traced back to us. So were you exactly? I burst out. Are you like two dirty cops? Supernatural special forces? Ghostbusters popped into my head. I bit back a laugh. CJ chuckled. Supernatural special forces does sound pretty good, he admitted. But I'm afraid there's no official name for us, son, and we're not nearly as organized as you probably think. There's only a handful of us scattered around Westington, probably less in smaller cities. He then proceeded to tell me one of the most complicated and confusing yarns I've ever heard in my life. I'll be honest, it sounded like it was lifted straight from a movie. And if I wasn't so desperate for answers, well, I'd have walked out in 2 seconds. But I didn't. I stayed put and listened to everything they had to tell me. And trust me, they had a lot to tell me. I definitely couldn't keep track of it all, but I managed to focus on the parts that mattered. I learned that the thing in the gap wasn't one of her kind. There were dozens, maybe even hundreds of things like her. Horrific, twisted, malevolent creatures that tried relentlessly to sneak into our world. Why? I don't know, CJ said. Not like we can ask him. All they knew was that these creatures were terrifyingly persistent. They hid in shadows and slipped through cracks, waiting for their chance to cross over. They did this, CJ told me, by choosing someone to latch on to. I don't know who figured it out exactly, CJ said, rubbing his beard thoughtfully. I guess word just got around. Some fella realized one day that they would haunt only one person. They'd torment them, follow them around, show themselves to them and nobody else until the victim lost their damn mind. And then what? I asked. I was afraid to hear the answer, but I had to know. I wouldn't be able to sleep otherwise. CJ sighed. Well, we don't know. Nobody does. No one alive has seen what happens between the victim losing it and the creature successfully crossed over. It can't be pretty, though. Things as twisted as them. Can't expect a shred of mercy from them. So why me? I asked. CJ and Goatee both shrugged in response. We don't know, son, he began. Our best guess is that you actually interacted with her. Talked to her, grabbed her the whole 9 yards. But we don't know why she showed herself to you in the first place. There's no rhyme or reason to how they operate. If there's a pattern to when they appear and to who, well, we haven't figured it out yet. We just know that they try to sneak into our world every few years or so. Yeah, someone don't ask me, who we don't know either. Figuring that there must be rules, Goatee began. Rules that not even those freaks can ignore. So maybe there's a god after all. How because something's keeping the monsters on their side of the gate. And the only reason they haven't managed to swarm through and kill all of us is because even they are scared of breaking those rules. But they certainly don't mind trying, CJ said. He sounded grim. So every few years or so, we get an upsurge of dwellers trying to sneak through the gates, and unfortunately, a few of them get through. That was the second or third time they mentioned gates. I pointed that out. That's what we call the spaces they can use to sneak through, CJ said. For lack of a better word, really. So you're a dweller. Her gate is, as we've established by now, gaps. But other dwellers can use basements or attics. Some dwellers use crash sites or accident sites to cross over. And hallways. Goatee cut in. You would not believe how many dwellers love to use hallways as their gate. The longer the hallway, the better. And abandoned spaces too, like old cabins and condemned buildings. Those are crowd favorites too. Believe me. Back rooms, shipwrecks, sewers. Oh my God, sewers. You think giant rats are the biggest threats in sewers? You got another thing coming. The point is, kid, they exist. CJ cut in the creatures on the other side of those gates. Every now and then something peeks through and looks at our side. I think it can make a run for it. It's our job to put those trespassers in their place. It's not an official job. Heck, nobody really knows what we do unless they do it themselves, right? But someone's got to do it. I looked at them. What was I supposed to say? All I could do was nod as I tried to process every piece of crazy information they told me in the past 30 minutes. Okay, I eventually managed to say. CJ, bless his heart, decided to spell things out for me again. We're telling you this because we can help you, son, he said. And I suddenly felt like I could breathe again. You can. We're going to help you get rid of her, CJ said. Trust us. We just need a few more days, okay? But how? I asked. Well, there's a spell. Yeah, of course there's a spell, I muttered. Goatee shot me a dirty look, but CJ just chuckled. Sorry, I mumbled. I didn't mean to, that's just not what I was expecting. I know, son. No harm done, CJ said. I felt a little bad, though. I was seeing a freaking ghost girl in the doorways. Was I really going to laugh at the concept of spells? Look, CJ pointed at the clock that hung over the office door. It's getting late, okay? I looked at the time. We've been talking for well over 2 hours, and I suspect you need time to process everything we just told you, he continued. That was an understatement. I could probably spend the next 24 hours trying to process what I've been told. Still wouldn't make sense, but maybe a hot shower and 8 hours of solid sleep would help. So I nodded. So we'll leave it at that, CJ began. You go home, right? You think things over, and if you still want our help, well, you come to the station tomorrow night around 10. My shift will be over by then, and the goatee here won't start till 1. Okay, was all I could say. CJ clapped me on the shoulder again. All right, we can talk more about how to get rid of her tomorrow. Go home, get something to eat, get enough rest. And for God's sake, he said, with just a hint of mischief, mind the gaps. I smiled again. For the second time that night, I did what he told me. I went home, showered until the hot water ran out, then helped myself to Natalie's leftovers. She was on her walking pad, trying to hit 10,000 steps, so I left her alone. I didn't even know how I would explain everything to her. Barely understood half of it. It was easier just to bid her good night, crawl into bed, and beg my brain to shut down, and let me sleep. I must have been more tired than I thought, because I dropped off to sleep almost as soon as my head hit the pillow. When I woke up the next day, I spent a few hours staring at the ceiling, letting my thoughts flow unhindered. Good thing it was Saturday. Nat seemed a little worried about me, but not enough to call off her once-a-week date with her friends. I waved her off with a smile. Then I spent the rest of the day on my laptop, researching. I read unsolved cases involving plane crashes, sewers, and abandoned buildings. I tried running searches on terms like gates and dwellers, but got really generic and perfectly normal results. So I started running Google searches for CJ and Goatee. I discovered CJ had been a cop for nearly 3 decades before transferring to Westinghouse. He'd been the sheriff of Reading County. Something happened. None of the reports said what made him resign. He moved to Westinghouse and was offered the position of deputy chief for Westington South End Police Force, but he declined and chose to stay as a beat cop. I also discovered Goatee's full name, but I was going to keep calling him Goatee. At 8 o'clock, I stopped researching. At 9 o'clock, I headed out of my apartment. I kept my head down, refusing to look at doorways and alleyways at the subway. I kept my head up, refusing to look at the gap. I took the train a couple stations over, getting off at the platform closest to Westinghouse South End Police Station. By the time I walked through the doors, it was 5 minutes to 10. CJ was at the front desk with a bunch of other cops, a styrofoam cup in one hand, and a bunch of folders in the other. One of the other cops noticed me standing in the station lobby like an idiot. "Can we help you, sir?" he called. CJ turned to look at me, and his face lit up with recognition. "Jason," he said, looking mighty pleased. "Are you here to go over your case file again?" I had no idea if that was the right code. I nodded anyway. "Yeah," I said. CJ beamed. I spent the next 3 nights at the police station with CJ and Goatee. We were mostly talking about how to get rid of the Gap Girl, of course. But every now and then, for context or to illustrate a point, CJ would slip in a story about his other Dweller cases. And against my better judgment, I found myself enjoying them. Turns out CJ had been doing this Dweller thing since Reading. I figured that since his past records were public, he didn't mind that I knew about that, and I was right. He spoke of reading fondly. It wasn't as active as Westington was, apparently, but he and his old team had plenty of experiences with Dwellers regardless. It was the Reading County priest who first told me about him. Actually, CJ said, "This was my 3rd night at the station." Goatee had gone out to take a call. CJ and I were in the old back office, helping ourselves to milkshakes and curly fries. "Well, the poor homeless guy had gone off the deep end," CJ continued. "Or so we thought. He was wailing about how his unborn son was following him, popping up in windows and puddles and on the surface of the lake. Reflections, basically. Said his son blamed him for the death of his pregnant wife." I listened. It was both his saddest and scariest story so far. I gestured for him to go on. Well, we were going to have him committed. Seemed like the kindest thing to do. The priest stopped me, asked if he could take a look at the case. Must have seen something. "You do this job long enough, son. You start to recognize signs of Dwellers." So he saw something, and he told me he'd take care of it. "Brave man," I murmured. CJ nodded. "One of the bravest I've known, and I've known a lot," he continued. "Must be about 90 now, last I heard. He's still handling Reading's gateways, training his apprentice to take over, probably." "Is Goatee yours?" I asked. "You know, you're your apprentice." "I mean Goatee." CJ laughed. "Nah, he's an okay kid, but he is very stubborn. Goatee's a fine partner, but he would make a lousy apprentice. Anyway, I'd be damned before I let the county priest handle the case alone," CJ continued. "I was the sheriff. After all, I swore to serve and protect. Couldn't stand by and let someone risk their life alone." "So this was your first banish, Sean?" I guessed. I'd learned most of their terminology by now. "Yes," CJ confirmed. I opened my eyes, that priesthood. Made me realize the world's a lot bigger and a lot more dangerous than I thought. It made me realize that I missed a lot too. I failed a lot of people because I wasn't aware of the gates. "Well, you didn't know," I pointed out. I didn't like that he seemed to be blaming himself. You can only know when someone shows you a gate or a Dweller latches onto you, right? I said. CJ shrugged, looking wistful. "Doesn't matter. I could have done more, though. The world's bigger than I thought, son. Could have helped a lot more people if I'd realized that sooner." I opened my mouth to argue, but Goatee came in. "Hey there, fellas. So Miller still has copper shavings and Everlife plants left over from the Hillsboro. Vanishing," he said, pushing his way into the office. He was holding a box that looked suspiciously damp. "I'll send them over in a bit. Once we add that, we can do Jason's banishing tomorrow or, day after. You just need to figure out a time," he said. "So, Sue?" I asked. Goatee nodded and set the box down on the table. Man, it smelled too. I moved my fries away from it. How about it, old man? Goatee asked CJ, hands on his hips, and what he probably thought was an all-business pose. It made him look 12 years old and again ridiculous. We can do the night after, CJ said thoughtfully. It'll be a full moon by then. End of a cycle. Symbolic enough to keep this gateway closed a little longer. Goatee nodded. I was shocked to know that it was all this easy, that it'd be over soon. In a few days, I no longer needed to make sure all doors and windows in my apartment were closed tight. I didn't need to avoid alleys and windows and curtains. I can do the ritual, Goatee was saying. You know, since you just did the one for Santos, give yourself a chance to heal up. No, CJ began. I can handle it. Besides, I've banished her before. It'll be easier the third time. I glanced between the two of them, trying to follow the conversation. Goatee didn't look happy. Exactly, Goatee said, looking equal parts confused and annoyed. You've cut your soul up enough times this year, okay? You can't risk it. Cut your soul up. I repeated before I could stop myself. What kind of expression is that? Goatee turned to glare at me. What are you? It's not an expression. I mean, he literally. It's part of the banishing spell, son, CJ cut in. He also didn't look happy, and I had a sinking suspicion it was because he didn't want to explain this part to me. In fact, it's what the spell does. You do it, right? You cut off a piece of your soul, and you give it to the gates, he said. CJ noticed my horrified expression. He reached out and laid a gentle hand on my shoulder. It's okay. That strengthens them enough that they recognize there's an intruder, he continued. Then they reinforce themselves to stop the intruder from passing through. It's a defensive spell, and one of the most effective ones we can use. And it's one of the few that's worked so far. A spell that allowed you to willingly give away your soul, I thought. I didn't get it. I'd done a pretty good job at suspending my disbelief the past few days, but this took the cake. Yeah, but not literally, right? I asked. Yeah, no, we mean literally, Goatee began. Otherwise, I wouldn't be arguing with Mr. Self-sacrificing over here. It has to be me, Summers, CJ said. He wasn't even calling him Goatee anymore. This was serious. Goatee made a frustrated noise. You did the last banishing. We agreed to take turns. You're the officer who handled this case, CJ pointed out. It's in the records. If he's reminded of the case, he'll need to remember you. But I'm just an old traffic cop. He can forget me easily. Okay, time out, I said. Jumped to my feet. I did not like how this conversation was going, and I didn't even understand half of it. Goatee was full on glaring at CJ now. CJ had a stubborn set to his jaw and shoulders. Suddenly, I could see how he'd been Redding County Sheriff. Okay, you want to back up and explain the banishing to me? I asked them both, but my eyes were on CJ. You know, I think I have a right to know. The tense silence stretched out for a couple seconds longer. CJ and Goatee were at a standstill. Finally, CJ gave in. He let loose a long, loud sigh. Dwellers need us to know they exist, he started. It's why they'll show themselves to the people they harm. We haven't completely figured it out yet, but we think awareness is important to them. The more people know of their existence, the weaker the gates are. I don't know why it works that way. It just does. That's why you have to do this in secret, I confirmed. I'd guessed as much early on, but it made sense. This was the kind of outrageous information that could easily spread. Why hide the fact that supernatural monsters existed, unless that was somehow detrimental to our survival? CJ nodded. Can't exactly tell the higher-ups we need funding to fight monsters from another dimension, he said wryly. No one would believe us unless we showed him proof, and we're not about to extend an open invitation to those things. So, I keeping secrets, I begin. But what's all this about souls and forgetting for the banishing to fully work? I need to give the gates a piece of my soul. And you need to forget about the Gap Dweller, CJ continued, so that less people know about her. I nodded slowly. That also made sense. And that means you need to forget about me and Goatee here, CJ said. Wait, no, I replied. We can't change memories, kid, CJ began. We can only remove parts of it. For the banishing to work, we need you to forget all the days you saw the girl in the gap. So from when you saw her in the subway, up until the day we banished her, and you met us during that time period. So, you need to forget about us too. You can't be serious, I shot back. I couldn't explain why exactly, but the thought of forgetting CJ made me want to punch a wall. That's how it works, kid, CJ added. Okay, how long have you been doing this? I reminded him. You said you started when you were in Reading. That was, 12 years ago. Goatee looked surprised that I knew about Reading. I ignored him. How long have you been giving away pieces of your soul? I continued. To keep people safe. People who can't even thank you because they immediately forget you. Look, I get you're upset, son, CJ interrupted. But I continued. No, Goatee is going to do the banishing, I said. You're risking a lot just to help me. If I have to forget you, then you're not giving up a piece of your soul for me. CJ gave me a look. It's mine to give Jason, he said. Okay, you've been at this for more than a decade, old man, I began. You can't have much left to give. You know what? Why can't we use my soul? I'm the one she latched on to, right? CJ placed both his hands on my shoulders. His grip was tight. It doesn't work that way, Jason, and you don't go making decisions for me. I decided long ago, way back in Reading, that I was going to give my life to stop this before he could continue. I interrupted him, and I don't want you risking your life for me just to forget about you. That's shit repayment, I said. Son, if I was told I could do it all over again, I'd still choose this, CJ said. I'll give as much of my soul as I can to keep those gates closed, he continued. And if that means giving my whole soul away, then so be it. I tried to jerk out of his grip. I wanted to punch him, knock some sense into that old head of his, but I couldn't break free, CJ continued. And when I have to give away the last bit of my soul, hell, I'll jump through the gates myself. No sense hurting anyone, letting the people who know me see me become whatever soulless creatures become. But you don't need to do that. I insisted. I choose to, he began, for the greater good. And you don't get to take my choices away from me, son. You understand? I was stunned. CJ looked me over as though waiting to see if I had any arguments left. I didn't. Don't stress about it, kid, CJ said. The anger I'd seen earlier was gone. There are dozens of us. Hundreds. People who couldn't save the one person they wanted to. So they save everyone else, hoping it'll make that one person proud. He finished. This wasn't an answer. It wasn't even close to the one I wanted. So I didn't say anything. Goatee and CJ continued to talk. When would be the best time to do the banishing? Who would they get as a lookout? Whether Santos from Search and Rescue would be willing to help with the ingredients, that sort of thing. Goatee still looked annoyed, but I guess CJ outranked him enough that he couldn't argue. I turned him out. When we were done, CJ and Goatee walked me out of the station. CJ had the night patrol this time. He offered to drop me off at my apartment, and I politely declined. I think I'm just going to go for a walk, I said. I need to clear my head. CJ nodded in understanding. He clapped me again on the shoulder. Chin up, son, he said gently. Just a few more days and you'll be rid of her. I managed to smile. I don't think it reached my eyes, though. Thanks, CJ, was all I could say. I waited until his cruiser pulled out of the station before I turned to Goatee. Is any of this real? I asked. Goatee arched an eyebrow. Pick your hand in the gap next time you see her. He dared me. He'll get your answer. He grinned. It made him look even younger. I mean, look at what you and CJ do. I clarified. Finding literal monsters. Banishing them. It's damn, man. I mean, the last few days have felt like a freaking Ghostbusters episode. This can't be real. Oh, don't worry, Goatee began. The stakes here are much higher than Ghostbusters. I'll tell you that. I let out a noise of frustration. Look, Jason, I don't know what to tell you, Goatee shrugged. You can see the girl in the gap. You know you're not hallucinating. And you know that if we don't get rid of her for you, she's going to drive you crazy. We've seen it happen before. I can tell you at least a dozen times. Trust me, it is not pretty. That brought me up short. Okay, you said you've never seen a successful haunting before, I said carefully. Were you lying then, too? Goatee winced, as though realizing he'd given himself away. His shoulders sagged the tiniest bit. Yeah, okay, we sugar-coated it, he admitted. We agreed there was no sense in telling you more than you needed to know. But you know we've been at this for a while, and you know you're not the first person she's used as an anchor, he said. His voice was a lot quieter as he continued. Like we told you. Alright, dwellers try to get out all the time. A lot of them succeed. There's only so much guys like us can do. You know, there's only so many of us. It's why CJ is such a determined, stubborn fool, he said. So he really gives his soul away to reinforce the gates and make people forget? I asked. Goatee simply nodded. And he's okay with that? I asked. I could feel my frustration rising again. I had no idea why this was upsetting me this much, but it was. It's the most effective way to get rid of creatures like her, Goatee reminded me. You forget they exist. They can't draw on your awareness. You guys are risking a lot, I began. He's risking a lot for me. For some random guy he just met, and I'm just supposed to forget what he's done for me. Goatee looked surprised. Well, yeah, he said. No one's had a problem with it this far. Well, I do. Why? He asked. I just do. Okay, you're supposed to be his partner, man, and you're okay with people. I don't know. Using him like this, Goatee's face hardened, but I wasn't done. The people he helps get to forget and move on, I began. He's the one who has to live with all this while giving away bits of his literal soul, by the way. And you just sit there and you let him. Hussy J has his reasons, Goatee shot back. I may not agree with his methods, but I understand why he does what he does. I opened my mouth to reply, but Goatee cut me off. And you know what? For the record, no one lets CJ do anything. You heard him back there. Don't make decisions for him. Everything he does is by his choice. He's come too far and done too much for somebody like me to cheapen his sacrifices. You understand that. I paused and looked at him. It's not fair, man. You really gonna make me say life's not fair, Jason? Goatee deadpan. Well, it's not. The next time I saw CJ and Goatee was at the train station, the same one where I first encountered the girl. She can't get out of there, right? I asked. I couldn't help it. I think she knew we were trying to banish her. Her bloodshot eyes were wide and filled with rage. Her lips, usually curled in a manic, demonic grin, were now twisted in a hateful snarl. The sheer force of her. It felt physical, heavy, almost palpable as she glared at us from the darkness of the ticketing booth. CJ and Goatee had decided that a doorway gap would be the best place to banish her. Something about symbolically closing the door to strengthen the gates more. So they chose to set up the ritual around the ticketing booth. It was a small, contained area on the same platform that she haunted. It had a door that we could open to make a gap where she could manifest and manifest. CJ spoke from somewhere behind me. I wouldn't let her, he said calmly, dusting some sort of powder off his hands. Goatee was somewhere to my right, rifle in one hand and a bag of something that smelled suspiciously like dead fish in the other. There were a couple of other people with us too, guys like CJ and Goatee. They introduced me to Miller, who was apparently the go-to guy for spell components. And Ian, a seasoned gatekeeper who had a killer aim when it came to containing dwellers, or so CJ told me. Don't faint on us, Jason, Goatee called. We need you conscious for the whole ritual. I could see Goatee and Ian cocking their rifles. I glared at him. Easy for you to say, I said. You're all the way in the back. I heard Miller and CJ chuckle. Goatee gave me a smug grin. I wiped my sweaty palms on my jeans and glanced back at the gap. Then I cursed. She was closer now. I didn't even know she could do that. But everything about her, it looked bigger. I couldn't explain it in any way that made physical sense, but it was like she was practically pressing against the gap, straining to get out. I never wondered about her size before this, but my God, she was huge. Her eye was probably the size of my head now, and her teeth looked like knives. I took a step back. Why, whoa, CJ said, placing a calming hand on my lower back. Do not step out of position, son. Everything needs to be very precise for this to work. Goatee snickered at that. Yeah, we need you to be a little bit braver, Jason, he said. I was sort of glad Goatee was still being a dick. It was oddly reassuring. Yeah, well, I'm literally facing my own demons over here, I shot back. CJ's startling blue eyes were trained on the monster in the doorway. Was it my imagination, or did it look angrier when it saw CJ? Just like that, Jason, CJ said, his voice comforting and sure. Face her down. Don't let fear paralyze you, kid. He finally took his place behind me. His presence was a solid, comforting weight behind me. I held on to it like an anchor. It wasn't my imagination. She was definitely angrier, and she was getting bigger. Whatever you do, don't let fear stop you from doing what's right, CJ said quietly. And then he began humming. No, that's not the right word. It was like singing, but there weren't any words. It was just music, raw and real, coming deep from his throat. It didn't sound like the kinds of sound a human could make, but who else could be making it? Goatee and Ian raised their rifles and pointed it at the thing in the gap. She started screeching. It was horrible. It hurt my ears. And more than that, it hurt my soul, I think. The noise she made, God, it was so terrible that I dropped to my knees and I covered my ears. My whole body began to shake. It was like it was burning me from the inside out. It was like the screeching of 100 souls. My instincts were screaming at me to put as much distance between me and whatever was making that noise. I looked over at Gotti and Ian, and they were even worse. They dropped their rifles and looked at me in some sort of daze. Their eyes were distant and black. I could see blood dripping from their ears. The pain was so horrible I could barely move, and if it wasn't for one thing, all hope would have been gone right there and then, and I knew she would have killed us all. Or maybe worse. If it wasn't for CJ, I could sense his courage behind me. I could practically feel him humming. It was comforting, reassuring. It made me think of Natalie, of my family, of my friends. I don't know why exactly, but I remembered being a child, no more than 5 or 6, sitting on my grandfather's lap as he smiled down at me. I took a deep breath, took my hands off my ears, and I stood my ground. I wasn't going to run from this. CJ hummed even louder then, and I heard the others let out a groan as if some sort of spell had been broken. Goatee got up to his knees, wiped the blood onto his shirt, and aimed his rifle. Ian did the same. They fired their rifles in unison. The loud crack from both sides nearly deafened me. The screeching stopped abruptly. The thing was staring at all of us now, its eyes fully red and bulging from the gap. I was breathless and winded. I felt like I'd been yanked between worlds, and I couldn't make sense of what I was feeling anymore. I couldn't move even though I wanted to. Almost there, Jason, CJ said. In the stillness of the station, the aftermath of that horrible noise, his voice was loud and firm. The thing in the gap heard him. She charged forward, screeching again. Close your eyes, son, CJ said. And I did exactly that. I wish I could tell you what happened next. I really do. But CJ told me to close my eyes, so I did. And I wasn't about to open them until he told me to do so. All I can tell you is that it went dead silent. I could feel CJ moving behind me. I heard the people around me doing the same. At one point I heard cursing. I think it was Miller. I heard Goatee and Ian fire again. They weren't as synchronized the second time. Someone fired half a second later than the other. But that's all I knew. I stood there, eyes shut tight, without a clue to what was happening around me. I just knew I trusted the people with me and the man behind me with my life, and that was all I needed to know. I stayed still. A full minute passed before I heard someone speak. Son of a bitch, Goatee said. He sounded pleased. You can open your eyes now, son. CJ said. I don't know how it happened, but at some point I must have turned around or CJ turned me around because I wasn't facing the ticketing booth anymore. I was facing CJ. I could see Miller over his shoulder, white as a sheet of paper. Is it over? I asked. CJ looked at me. Turn around and look at the gap, kid. Tell me what you see. I slowly turned and looked. The first thing I saw was a regular wooden office door with a crooked sign on the front. It was slightly open. Through the gap between the door and the frame, I could see the insides of the ticketing booth, a desk, a swivel chair, a computer, and piles of paper. There was no monster in sight. I turned back to CJ and smiled. Goatee looked over at me. Every damn time, he said. Miller spoke next. Yeah, he's one of the few with a near-perfect record, he said, clearly still in pain. CJ chuckled a little. He looked so tired, though. I could see it. There were bags under his eyes. The lines around CJ's mouth looked deeper. His shoulders drooped. There was a slight hunch to his back that hadn't been there hours ago. I reached out to grab his arm and sling it over my shoulder. CJ looked surprised, even as I encouraged him to lean against me. You look like you've been through the ringer, old-timer, my son. His eyes sparkled. This ain't my first rodeo, son. He paused for a second. I'm afraid it's not over yet, though. Gotta make sure Gap Girl stays gone, right? He said. You did good, Jason. You put your trust in a couple of beat cops when you didn't have to, and the world's a little safer for it. It'll be a long while before she's back, I'll tell you that. I didn't do anything, I said. CJ didn't bother arguing. He just lifted his hand, gave me a warm, gentle smile, and said one thing. I'm going to miss you, kid. Then he pressed his thumb to my forehead and the world went black. When I came to, the sun was shining overhead. It was so bright I had to squint. The cool air in relative quiet told me it was still pretty early. People were probably just getting out of bed. I sat up and took in my surroundings, trying to figure out where I was. It looked like a park, paved walkways, benches, bordered patches of green, and plenty of trees. A dull ache shot through me as I tried to move my legs. I had to bite back a groan. My whole body felt battered and bruised. I took a deep breath and looked around me again. Where the hell was I? How the hell did I get here? And then I heard a voice. Hey there, you okay? I looked up. Two cops stood a few feet away from me. One was an older officer with these bright blue eyes. He looked concerned. The much younger cop next to him looked bored. You know, he had the stupid goatee that did nothing to detract from his baby face. I managed to swing my legs off the bench and onto the ground, but that took a lot of effort. I tried not to groan in pain again, but I don't think I succeeded. Whoa, easy there, son, the older officer said. They both walked closer. Where am I? I managed to croak out. God, my mouth was dry. You are in a state park, the younger officer replied, about a block from Redstone Station. Okay, I thought. I mean, that made a little sense. The station closest to my apartment. I mumbled as I tried to get up. The ache in my legs was going away, but the throbbing in my head was pretty persistent. I gotta go. My girlfriend's probably worried. Was I out all night? I asked. Yeah, it looks like you had quite the night, didn't you? The old cop said. He held his hand out to me. I took it. My name is Officer Connor Rourke, son, he said, helping me to my feet. My partner and I found you passed out on this park bench, he continued. Do you need any help getting back to your apartment? I didn't say anything. I just stared at the two of them. Finally, Goatee arched an eyebrow at me. The jig was up. I managed a tired but genuine smile. So your name's Connor, I began. So what's the J stand for? CJ froze at that. Next to him, Goatee smiled. I knew it would work, he said. I rolled my eyes. Oh God, still nauseous. I shouldn't have moved. I looked over at Goatee. Please, dude, you were just as worried as I was before we started the ritual. You didn't know shit, I said. Yeah, well, at least I don't look like shit, Goatee shot back. That was a pretty good comeback, Jason, CJ asked. Now, even though I was about as coordinated as a newborn giraffe, I managed to lift my hand enough to clap CJ on the shoulder. I didn't want to forget, I said simply. And for once, I wasn't the one lost and confused. It was a nice change of pace. Now, CJ was much too dignified to keep repeating what I did, so he just looked at me until I caved. Didn't take much. I asked Goatee if there was a way to alter the ritual. I admitted. Oh my god, my head hurts so bad still. Anyway, I asked if we could banish her without me forgetting her. I didn't want to forget you guys, I said. CJ's brow immediately furrowed, but Goatee spoke first. You know, I told him that was how some of us did it. How else do we recruit other stupidly brave souls to help us? Heck, it's how we got Santos. Got rid of a backroom dweller that had latched on to his wife. Goatee finished. But forgetting his easier son, CJ argued. He looked worried and more permanent. If you remember her, she could use you again as an anchor. You're not 100% safe now. The thought had crossed my mind when I was discussing logistics with Goatee. It was a risk I was willing to take, though. Sure, that began, but I also know how to get rid of her. If she tries again, it'll take her a couple years, like you said, right? I'll just shove her back through the gates, feed in my own soul if I have to. CJ looked shocked. Rightfully so. How long have you been doing this, CJ? I began. Years, right? You've been doing this for years. My soul's in a much better state than yours, right? So how about you let me make the sacrifice plate every now and then, old man? Why don't we give your soul a little break? This is serious, Jason, CJ said. But he didn't look upset anymore. Didn't look too concerned, even. He looked sort of touched. She's not the only dweller out there, he continued. You'll be like us now, a magnet. They're drawn to people like us because they know we know. You're vulnerable. All right, don't worry about it, I said. I squeezed his shoulder reassuringly and told him one thing. I want to mind the gap next time. A few months after the banishment, I met Annie. Nat and I were at the hospital for our annual checkup. Natalie, the health nut, insists on a full workup every time, and she always needs to have an intense discussion with the attending physician after we get our results. So I sat in the ground floor waiting room, waiting for Nat to finish pestering poor DR. Martinez when I noticed a little girl nearby. Tears were coming down the girl's chubby little cheeks as a nurse talked to her. That was Annie, a sweet 7-year-old girl with braided pigtails and missing front tooth. She carried around a ratty stuffed bunny with big button eyes and lopsided ears. No, I have to wait for Daddy, she was saying. If I go up alone, the man in the hallway's gonna get me. That's just the doctor, Annie the nurse replied, her voice sweet and gentle. Come on, your mom knows you're here already. I'm sure she'd love for you to visit. Annie shook her head. It's not the doctor, she insisted. I know the doctor. I mean the man. The man in front of Mommy's door. The one with no skin and no eyes. I stared at her. So did the nurse. Okay? The nurse said. She looked uncomfortable and definitely creeped out. But your dad went all the way to the pharmacy to buy your mom's medicine. He might be a while. Can you wait 20 or 30 minutes? Annie nodded. The nurse and I exchanged uneasy looks. All right, sweetie, I need to get back to work, though. Okay, so just stay here while you wait for your dad, okay? Annie nodded again. The nurse patted her head and walked off, throwing one worried look in Annie's direction. I waited a bit before introducing myself. Hey, I said, your name's Annie, right? She nodded shyly. She looked a little wary of me, but not outright scared. I can work with that. Well, it's nice to meet you. I'm Jason, I said. Hi, Jason. This is Bunny, she said. She held up her stuffed rabbit to me. Well, it's nice to meet you, Bunny, I replied. Annie giggled. With enough gentle questioning, I learned that Annie's mom had been admitted for severe food poisoning. She was stable, but very dehydrated. The doctors wanted to keep her in the hospital for a full week just to be on the safe side. I also learned that Annie had seen the No Eyes Man on her first night here. The doctor handling her mom's case was an old family friend, so Annie and her father were allowed to stay past visiting hours. Annie had spent the whole first day with her mom, reading books and watching some TV. Her father arrived a little after midnight to bring her home. The man with no eyes wasn't there when we went into the room, Annie said, but he was there when we left. Apparently, she'd taken one look at him and started screaming. It took a whole group of doctors and nurses to calm her down, but that didn't make the no eyes man go away. Every time Annie came to visit her mom, she told me tearfully. He was there, waiting just outside her mother's door. Then he told her dad about him, but of course her dad couldn't see him either. Mommy can't see him either, she said sadly. And Daddy said to stop talking about him because Mommy needs to get better. I didn't know how to respond to that. I just gave her a small understanding smile, and I gestured for her to continue. I don't like him, she said. He's really big and really crooked, and he doesn't have eyes. My God, her dwellers sounded horrible, the stuff of literal nightmares. I felt anger flare up in me as I took out my phone and sent a quick text message. My mind was made up. I hadn't even seen it yet, but I already hated it for choosing a child to latch on to. She was done with her story, apparently, and now was intent on making bunny tap dance. I gently nudged her shoulder to get her attention. Hey, Annie, do you think you can take me? To meet the No Eyes Man. No, I can't go near him without Daddy. He's scary. She burst into tears then. I felt horrible for making her cry. I know, Annie, I know I began, but I need to see the No Eyes Man because I think I can make him go away. You can? She asked. Yeah, but I need to see him first. I need to see where he's staying so I can make him leave. I'm so sorry to make you do this, sweetie, but I need you to be brave and show me. Do you think you can do that? She thought about it for a minute as my phone chimed with a new message. Okay, Annie sniffled. She wiped her face on the hem of her skirt, getting tears and snot all over it. Then she got to her feet and turned to me. Okay, I'll show you. I smiled and stood up as well, following your lead. Thanks, Annie. You're so brave for doing this. I'm proud of you. I'm in it, too. She nodded, suddenly all business, and took my hand. Her mom's room was on the second floor. We took the stairs and headed for the nurse's station. Before we got there, Annie pointed at a hallway to the right. We have to go here. Mommy's in room 217. I think he lives in the hallway, she said. Then he took one more step and then stopped completely. She pointed down the hallway. There. He's right there. I slowly looked where she was pointing, but I couldn't see anything. No shadows, no stains, no creepy flickering lights. The hallway was completely normal and completely empty. You can see him, right? She asked me in a tearful, wobbly voice. I squeezed her little hand in mine and stared again as hard as I could at the spot she'd pointed out. I can't, Annie, I said softly. I knelt down and pulled her closer. She whimpered and squeezed her toy bunny harder. I'm sorry, honey. I can't see what you see, but I know someone who can. I work as an archivist for a historical society in a rather large city in the U.S., so I get to handle a lot of interesting things and a lot of not so interesting things. There are a lot of items that have been donated or bought, but the backlog is extensive and some items have been sitting for decades, untouched and unexamined. I found this particular document hidden in a false bottom of an early colonial chest. The donor is unknown, and I couldn't find any documentation on when this was obtained by the society. This isn't unusual, though. Also hidden with the parchment was a broken piece of antler, some herbs and flowers in small apothecary jars, stick bundles, and small iron squares wrapped tightly in remarkably preserved leather with strange symbols carved in them. It speaks of old gods, ancient ones. Ever since I opened the chest, I've had a slight headache, so I'll just post this here and see what you all think. Hymn of the Woods. Date illegible. Mama says we are the secret keepers for Hymn of the Woods, and no other family in our village has that honor, nor will they ever. I asked her when she initiated me. Why? Why just us? We've only lived here since Papa was just a little boy, and Grandfather took his family from Boston to settle in the untamed Inwoods. Him is ours, just Mama and mine. I know it is not proper grammar, but Prudence Howard, that busybody, isn't here to chastise me like she does during our lessons. So I'll write how I please, though I do it poorly. I haven't the mind for it, Papa says, but I digress. Him has lived here since forever, and us only a little bit, so it has not been our secret for long. Someone must have come before us, but we do not know who, and he will not say. Mama says it is us now because she doesn't just hold God's word in her heart, but the words of the old nameless gods before God, her mother and grandmother, and so forth. They're gods. And now I have the words in my heart too. It was likely the tribe of natives that lived here before the settlers before us drove them out. Sometimes I wish they'd return and take over some of his biddings of him, so I don't have to rise so early in the morning. Well, I think what Mama and I must do is blasphemy against God, just as the preachers say. But Mama knows just about everything and says it isn't so. The preachers are just confused on that matter, since they've never known the old gods. So says Mama, and she's almost always right. Almost. And anyways, I've seen him with my own eyes and haven't seen our Lord God yet. Even though Papa says God is in all things, including slimy toads and the big fat spiders that weave their webs in the rafters of the barn, I don't think even God loves spiders. Or why do they hide away, so as not to shy away from his watchful eye? They are devils and demons is why, and that's all I have to say on the matter. I do not think God minds the old gods anyway, or Mama would have been struck down deaf or dumb, or both long ago. Or her mother before that. Or if he does, the old gods are more powerful, and God is afraid. And now I wish I did not put that to paper. I do not know either way. I'm only 11 years old and not privy to the mystical wonders of any of the gods. All I know is our harvest is plentiful. Our goats produce sweet milk most of the time, and my brother and sister are healthy as anything. We have no curses or blasphemy. If we are committing some sin, God is blind to it. Papa doesn't know about him in the woods, and I bet he would switch both Mama and I probably within an inch of our lives if he did know. But we are very good, and it doesn't take up much time, and he doesn't allow for our discovery anyways, or we'd all perish. So I suppose we are all damned or cursed, and it is not specific to Mama nor me, or is it nor I? I digress. We aren't witches, if that's what you're thinking. So get that out of your head, because it isn't so. At least I don't think we are. And Mama just laughs when I ask and says that witches probably get a more advantageous deal in the end. We have signed no book, nor exchanged our souls or left newborn babies as sacrifices to dance naked with Satan or his messengers. Though we do sometimes dance in the woods, but only to our own voices, and certainly never naked. And he is not there, and he doesn't like us to linger long. After we see him sometimes, the air still lingers with a sort of nervous energy, and so we dance and skip until the feeling disappears and we are back to our old selves. Still, I will hide this little letter well in my trunk and guard it with my life, for I must tell someone my secrets, even if it is just scratched onto parchment, or I fear I will burst. Perhaps I will write more letters to no one if I need to. But for now I will hide this carefully, for our lives depend on it, and I do know it to be foolish. Mama says her prayers and grace most beautifully, and does believe in God's word with all her heart. Just accept the bit about no other gods before him, as God has not punished us yet for wickedness, and we have seen what he is capable of. He is neither demon nor devil, though he would be mistaken for one quite easily. One time Mama was too ill to take out his offering, and I was too young and hadn't been told of our arrangements. She was gone for most of the day, and worried Papa until he came upon her, half crawling from the woods with a broken antler in her back and covered in welts, saying a stag came at her out of nowhere but was spooked away by the guard dog. Papa was furious, not at Mama though, for he has a special tenderness for her. The next day, all the men in the village went hunting for a stag with a broken antler and found none. But they did bring back a hearty venison feast, and we all ate rather well over the next few weeks. It is a tradition now in March, though I put cotton in my ears so I don't have to hear the stag scream, Mama says. It's only in my head, but I hear them all the same. However, Mama says I'm not to worry. Him is always kind to me, even when angry, and not always to Mama. I do not know why. Once I dreamed I had married him, and we lived in the forest as wild things, and I told Mama. She looked more afraid than I had ever seen her, and she slapped me so hard I heard bells for the rest of the day. She came to me later that night when the others were asleep, red-eyed and very sorry. I forgave her because she's my Mama, though I never shared my dreams with her again. There is another dream that I dare not put into writing for fear that words will make it true. It happens to me sometimes. While others welcome sleep, I dread it. But I digress once more. I must go to bed. We will be up early in the morning for our offering to him under the guise of cleaning linens at the stream. There's always so much to do. And the little ones are crying for bedtime stories. And oh dear, here they come now. I knew I started this recollection for some reason, and it is to tell the story today, not the dribbling of yesterday. It has all gone wrong, and I am to blame. Mama and I went to the woods as the dawn rolled into our sleepy village. Hauling all our dirty linens as usual in Papa's creaky handcart, we dropped the little ones at Goodwife Carpenter's house with day-old loaves as payment. She likes the little ones well enough anyways, especially my little sister with her cherubic face and soft curls. But the Goodwife Carpenter is greedy and won't lift a finger unless she has some benefit. We brought him 3 fresh rabbits from the traps and some fresh berries I picked along the way. But Mama told me not to dawdle, so for the berries were not worth as much effort as I put in gathering them, and scolded me for staining my apron with their sticky juices. She forgot we would be doing linen soon anyways, but she gets terrible nerves before seeing him and is more irritable than grandfather's donkey, who is always crossing and biting at someone hateful things. Him does not frighten me unless angry, but Mama says that may change one day, and I will always be frightened. I hope not. I hope my own daughter will not be frightened when I teach her someday, too. The offering spot is deep in the woods near an old gnarled oak that grows halfway on an old rock. It is a lopsided thing, and looks like a giant snake of a tree swallowing that rock. All tangled roots weaving this way and that. Him tells me each root is a story, but I don't know how to hear them yet. I don't think I want to know him stories, though. They are old and not of our world, and I doubt I would understand them anyhow. We left the unskinned rabbits and berries on the stone slab. My tea is very old and smooth from use, carved into the base of the rock with ancient tools. Once the offering was in place, Mama took out her penknife, rolled up her sleeves, and made a small cut near her elbow where it would be discreet. It is a different spot every time, otherwise it would look odd and Papa would be suspicious. He thinks Mama and I are thumbs for all the barbs and nettles we get scratched on, or so he thinks. I did the same as Mama, and the knife didn't hurt, but the cut did sting afterwards. We left our bloody drip together on the offerings. Only a few drops are needed to mark it for him. It does seem witchy now that I put it to paper, but it is more of a marking as a dog marks trees or the like, as Mama says, and not an oath or binding as one does with the devil. I don't know if it has to be blood that we believe, but the alternatives are far more indecent. It must be blood, I think, but I will reflect on this further and ask Mama if she is in good enough spirits one day. After we left the offerings, we stood back a few steps and waited. It doesn't take long for him to appear. The roots of the gnarled oak tree began to tremble, then near the base of the tree, they untangled, as if unfastening some horrid, fleshy corset until the tree unfurls to show the blackish red mass that resides within. From that ooze of red flesh, him of the woods emerges, antlers first, to assess his offerings. The appearance of him is difficult to describe, but I will endeavor to try. He has the antlers and face of a stag, though his snout is more wolfish than cervine, with the torso and arms of a man, though covered in thick dark fur. He stands upright, towering over Mama and I easily, and taller than any man I've seen, balanced on his hind legs that end in padded paws, not hooves, though he has no tail that I've seen. I never cease to wonder how he fits in the tree. Or perhaps the tree is some sort of doorway for him from his own ancient place. It sounds like an awkward creature, but he moves so fluidly, like the gentle brook near our village. Around his hips is an odd bit of leather like the natives, presumably to cover unmentionables, but its purpose I've not discovered, with a pouch on one side and a long slender knife secured to the other. I have never seen him use it and wonder if it serves more of a ceremonial purpose than practical. But Mama says I wonder about odd things, and I have no argument with that. When he appeared, Mama prostrated herself before him on the damp earth, and I flung myself next to her in haste. When he speaks of the wood speaks, it is not through his mouth as you and I do, but inside one's head. He says things to Mama that I cannot hear, and he says things to me that she cannot. Sometimes it is to both of us. Your offering is sufficient, him told us. We continued to bow on the earthen floor, not daring to look up. We heard snuffling and knew him was eating our offering. Only when the sounds quiet down did we relax and sit up to look at him properly. Have we given enough for winter? It is difficult to get away once the snow sets in. Mama wrung her hands and worried. It is true. Sometimes the snow is too heavy to leave our log house, or the blizzards are too strong. Mama tries to build up our offerings to make the winters easier. Him bowed his head slightly. I hear distant chimes when he is near, though I don't know the source. Perhaps he has invisible bells in his antlers, ones I cannot see but can only hear. Nearly twice more in a creature larger than a rabbit. Then you will retreat in winter. I will stave off the darkness with what you have brought me. We exhaled in relief and exchanged a satisfied glance. Our exchanges are usually brief, though Mama goes without me sometimes to convene with him. I felt his eyes searching me curiously, and my cheeks felt flush. He asked how I fare, and I answered, healthy and well. He appeared satisfied with my answer and moved toward his great oak. But, alas, a twig snapped nearby, and he disappeared so quickly all I felt was wind flurrying my bonnet. We strayed frozen in place, not daring to move. I heard a struggle nearby, with crunching leaves and branches and a muffled cry. I eyed Mama and prayed it was not the little ones or father who came to look for us. They will die if they do. When he returned, he clutched a struggling child with bulging, scared eyes. Mama exhaled in relief. It was not my mischievous brother, nor my sister. But, alas, it was Prudence Howard, the nosy busybody. Had I condemned her by writing her name yesterday at nightfall? My dreams, my thoughts, what I write. Sometimes I feel I conjure things or make them happen by giving them names. She is a curious thing, always wandering off where she shouldn't go. But we were deep in the woods where she shouldn't be. Where's her mother? Is this yours? Mama shook her head. Prudence met my eye, confused and scared. Her eyes burned with something else, too. Anger, I think. Recognition, perhaps, as well. She once called me a witch when I refused to share a maple sweet with her several years back, and I slapped her in return. I suppose she thought in those moments that perhaps she was right after all, even if accidentally so. Something drips from her foot, and I worry it is blood, but she had wet herself in fear. Him of the Woods tightened his grip on her neck until it snapped with an awful crunch, and she dropped lifeless to the ground. Her body sounded like a sack of flour hitting the ground, a gentle thud to the soft earth. Her eyes were frozen wide in terror, even in death, and a little blood trickles from her nose. I held back tears, and he spoke to me, to only me. Do not be afraid. She would be your ruin. You would die from the words she tells your others. This I saw in her heart. I know it. I suppose he can see all. Do we put our blood on her? I asked Mama. She looked up at him with fear in her eyes, and after a moment she shook her head. He does not consume our kind, she said. I thought it a pity, as it would save us another trip later on, but then felt guilty when I saw Prudence's scared, dead eyes staring back at me. She was my age, though a great deal smaller. As she was a sickly child. She is sickly no more, I suppose. Him from the Woods reached into his satchel and handed me a bundle of small twigs wrapped in dried squirrel gut. At least I think it was a squirrel. I thanked him, though I didn't want it, nor understood what it was. A talisman, Mama tells me later, that will bring me extra protection and no ill dreams for a little while. Him watched us a moment longer, and I am unsure if he spoke to Mama, but she said nothing. He turned and disappeared back into the oak tree, the roots closing after him like 1,000 spider legs. I shuddered. Prudence is still there, dead, and after a moment I turned my head and retched over and over until my belly ached. Mama tried to soothe me, but I didn't hear her words, nor did I want to. She was just as afraid, I think, and I didn't want her to think I won't be able to take over for her when she is too old or too sick. We took Prudence to the huge climbing rock near where the waterfall starts our village stream. It was still too early for children to be playing there. They were still sleeping, finishing morning chores, and we kept a careful watch for anyone else, but we saw no one. Perhaps my talisman was at work. After we finished our horrible task, we swept into the woods again to begin our farce. It will look like a terrible accident, and Prudence was known for wandering where she shouldn't be, a high ledge in this case, to make the broken neck believable. Mama procured our linens from our hiding spot and placed them into our handcart. We emerged from the woods after checking our other traps back near the village and had a decent haul of a few rabbits, one pheasant, and one half basket of berries. I skinned and dressed our boon while Mama beat the linen in the frigid water. Her eyes were half mad and her cheeks red as she swung at the linen, and I wondered what she was thinking of. Likely, I do not wish to know. She continued her abuse of our bed sheets when cries of alarm were raised, sobbing and screams in the distance. The body was found, broken and bruised from our terrible deed. Mama continued beating the linen, deaf the world, until I shouted at her to stop. We must go help the others, or it will look strange, I told her. She looked at me. With hollow eyes, I wonder if my eyes will look the same when I am her age. I wonder if I will look much older than my true age from the weight of our secret, the burden it brings. My daughter will share the same burden, and her daughter too. That is the way of him. It is not questioned. They would not call us witches if they knew our secret is not just him of the woods, but what he is protecting us from. That is the true burden, and it weighs heavy with the lives of hundreds, thousands even. Would they stone us and burn us as witches if they knew we were saving them? The cats keep us safe. Today, I don't have an artifact to share, but something about the archive itself, the cats who live here. The internet loves cats, so here I deliver. There are 4 of them, and no one knows where they came from. My boss is the head curator, Agatha Tremble. Pseudonym, but the spirit is still the same. She is a quirky and endearing woman in her 40s or 50s with a wild sense of fashion. For instance, today's theme is peacock, which includes a lot of real peacock feather jewelry and a matching pillbox hat. Seriously, Miss Tremble is about as mysterious as the archive. I know very little about her personal life, but I imagine that she lives in an old Victorian house filled with weird books, taxidermy animals, and at least a few ghosts that she probably has regular conversations with. But anyways, this is all to say that even Miss Tremble doesn't know where the cats come from. But her motto is don't ask. You probably don't want to know anyways. We hear that a lot. The cats, like I said, we don't know where they came from, but there's always 4 of them. Some of the older volunteers remember different cats, so I think we can rule out immortality as a trait, but there are always 4 of them. Miss Tremble leaves food and water out, but to everyone's horror, there's no litter box to be found. And yet there's never been an issue. No one talks about it, but it's just weird. Where are they? Oh, don't ask. You don't want to know. First, there's Henry VIII, called Henry, or 8 for short. He's a big, fat ginger cat, thus so named after the English king, not for any divorced, beheaded, or dead wives, but simply because he's tubby and ginger, and a reality that cats generally seem to have. Henry lords over the reading room, and is the only cat that the public sees. He loves being a pet, being fed, and generally just hangs around his basket or cozy-looking documents waiting for treats. He's a sweetie. No one usually has the heart to push him off whatever they're trying to read, but he'll move in due time when he feels like it. Good old Henry. He seems useless, but he's great for morale. He's always been known to chase off any member of the public with sticky fingers, sweating coffee cups, or any other offensive thing that might damage documents. That's the only time you'll see him hustle or in a bad mood. Don't damage the goods, and Henry's your best friend. Shere Khan is our little champ. She's a sleek tortoise shell that can be found stalking the halls at night. She doesn't keep to one area like most of the cats do. We have the museum floor and the reading room, which are both accessible to the public, some small offices and staff areas, and then several levels of archives. Accessible only to staff or volunteers with a proper clearance, depending on the archive. She's the only one that's ever seen interacting with the other cats, and even then it's fairly cordial, almost businesslike. Cher is the little hunter. If you find a dead mouse or the dreaded moss lying in a doorway, it was her. She keeps the riffraff down. We rarely, if ever, have pest troubles. It's an old building, so she's a busy girl. She doesn't like to be touched for the most part, but she's been known to curl around your ankles for a rare pet. When I'm alone in the building, I know she's near, even if I can't see her. It's kind of nice. She has spotted some of our more unusual activities often before we do our canary when needed. There's the white one. No one can remember its name, but we all have a different name for it. No one remembers what color its eyes are, or whether it's a boy or girl, or even how big it is, or where it usually haunts, or where it guards, or lastly, there's Bast. Not everyone gets to see her, but since I have a high level clearance into the lower levels, I've seen this shadow cat Bast. Is the one that frightens me. She is big, larger than a normal house cat, but not as large as the panther she resembles a little too much. It's the ears and the amber eyes. You can see them even in the blackest dark. I'll be in the blue room, which houses the more rare or delicate unlisted objects, locating some secret thing for some high-up person, and Bast will be there. Two glittering green eyes in the dark, watching me from the sturdy upper shelves. There's artifacts and files up there that no one can access. Not that anyone wants to be Bast up there. The other odd thing is the blue room is always locked. She lives there behind a locked door. No food, no water that I can see anyway. She guards the red room, too. No one goes into the red room. I don't even know why it's called the red room, except the door is red. The blue room has beautiful blue wallpaper, the old kind you can't find in any hardware store with a blue door. So I guess we all assume the red room is red inside. I don't think Miss Trimble goes in the red room. She's the head of the archive. She's rarely ever afraid of anything, and we've had plenty to be afraid of. Stories for another time. And she's afraid of the red room. There's chains on the door to the red room. Multiple heavy-duty chains. New ones, old ones, ancient ones. Locks too. There's sounds that come from the red room. Quiet sounds, whispers, muffled sounds. Gentle tapping, moans, groans, wails. It's worse when there's nothing. Silence. There's a peephole in the red room, not looking into the room, looking out. If you get too close, Bast growls. That low rumble of danger makes your belly churn. I've never gotten farther than too close. I heed her warning. Miss Trimble sings the highest praises to the guardian cats. They keep us safe. I don't ask because I don't want to know the answer. God save us or the devil. The following are letters that were donated by a couple who found these in the attic of an old house they'd inherited. The curator's notes simply indicate the couple wished to burn them at first, but instead brought them to the archives in case they held some sort of historical value. We've not been able to locate any information about the contents of the letters, except to confirm an unusual amount of disappearances in the town mentioned in the letter, redacted for safety purposes. March 7th, 1872, dearest Mary. Fine fiddle. It is a somber day for a somber occasion. We laid grandfather's weary bones to rest yesterday, and today we are all in foul moods. We are all old. Old house together now. Dear Mama and Papa, George, the dreaded Harrison, Molly, and all of the twins, who were just 6 as of last week. They say they miss you the most, and I allow it, but really it is me who misses you most. June. Lovely June has been set away to Auntie Harriet's, for she is too wild of a young lady, and Auntie Harriet will tame her with that wretched etiquette school. Do you remember balancing books? Yours were always perfect. I had to pin my hair so that the things stayed on my head. Though the house is big, it's too full of things and people and noises. I thought grandfather came to Missouri with just the clothes on his back. Though he prospered in trade and languished in love, he has accumulated more than a lifetime of things. There are 2 rooms just stuffed full of clothes and shoes. It is no wonder that we were only allowed in the parlor and dining room. Mama is going through them to see what can be donated. There are so many poor after the war, and good shoes are hard to come by, Papa says. There are more rooms that we cannot even see due to the excess of things. Can you imagine? I hope you are living fat and well as a married young woman, dear sister. I miss when we would lay under the covers at night and whisper the names of our future loves into seashells in hopes that someday the sea would bring us them. I am glad that yours came true. I fear I am too old now, though 23 is not so old, says George. Harrison says I might as well jump off Piccadilly Bridge, and I hold my tongue that it is far more tempting to push him off it. His moods grow foul, and he stinks of drink. It is lucky he isn't the eldest son, or Papa would have him locked away in shame. Now that we have the means, he may do just that. The other day, he pinched me so hard under my arm for being a sass that it drew blood. I ran and cried to Papa, and it started a thunderstorm of shouting. Anyways, you don't want to hear all of that in your happy, newlywed home. I hope California treats you well, and it should if the stories of gold-paved roads are true. Forever your sister, and always your friend. Paulette. April 28, 1872. Darling Mary, how will you sound in your last letter? I've laughed so hard I cried when you told of the fiasco at the hotel. I can't imagine whose bloomers those must have been in that poor donkey. Imagine I have news of this house. We've cleared so many things, and still there is more trinkets of all kinds jewelry, none of it particularly fine watches with inscriptions and pipes strewn about. Mama wondered if perhaps soldiers lived here for a spell, perhaps after the war, but none of us can remember any mention of it. The neighbors are miles away, and only saw Grandpapa here, occasionally with drifters passing through doing labor for chores. Perhaps these are their payments in exchange for food and board. Next to the barn is a slaughtering shed hidden behind piles of lumber. Foul thing. There are no cows or pigs anymore, but Papa has a mind to purchase some and build us a nice flock. Papa, who can barely remember to feed himself, let alone animals. It will be Mama's work, as always, from Papa's ideas. We are having a poor time finding help. Mama has sent inquiries all over town, and no locals are up to the task. She has given up and put in an advert in the redacted paper, and Auntie Harriet is sending over a girl or two that she deems suitable. The rest of the family is fine. Except for Harrison, of course. He refuses to sleep in the house, saying it has bad bones. It does not. The timber is the finest that can be found. He said he has half a mind to live elsewhere, so do not answer any of his letters, or you'll soon find his own foul spirit haunting your halls. I'm certain he is the one who spat in all the bonnets. Foul thing. Oh, Mary. Halfway through writing this letter, a terrible scream shook the house. We all went running. My hand is trembling still, and after yelling and yelling to find the source, we located Mama, dragging the twins out of a little half door in one of the bedrooms she's been clearing out. They were covered head to toe in soot and dust, and little Ollie was holding a skull in his hand. A human skull, painted a deep red. Oh, it is a horrible looking thing, but curious as well. The skull has golden teeth and sockets painted white. The lower jaw is sewn onto the upper one, with twine laced through its teeth. The top is removed so that it appears to be some sort of bowl or chalice, though all that was in there, says Ollie, was a dead mouse. Harrison took it from Mama while she went to clean the children up and began chasing me with a horrible thing until dear Papa intervened. Hateful young man. I asked Papa to hide it away. I can't stand looking at it. I feel like it is looking back. What wretched findings. Why on earth would Grandfather have such a thing? Your horrified sister, Paulette, May 7th, 1872, Sister Mary, all are ill, the twins first, then the rest of us. If we aren't running to the privy, we are sequestered in our rooms, clutching buckets and chamber pots. Mama thinks it is in the water, and it all must be boiled. A hard task, carrying water to the house. Harrison refuses to come into the house and care for us, the foul beast. He leaves us water buckets on the porch, though a small comfort. I do not think it is the water. It must be the food. Something has turned. We have scoured the pantry, in between dashing to buckets. No one can eat a morsel without becoming ill. It is a misery to pick up this pen, but write to you I must. I will beg Harrison to mail my letter and send for a doctor, if we are not well by tomorrow. I hope you are well. Much love, so much love, Paulette. May 9th, 1872, Mary, the doctor will not come, he told Harrison. He fears it to be cholera, and sent some remedies to administer, which he left on the porch. I watched him go to the fields with shovel and spade and begin tilling the fields. Does he dig our graves? He may never send these letters, if so. Yes, I will write this hours later. The twins are dead. Perhaps Harrison is wiser than I give him credit for. I love you. May 21st, 1872, Mary. I'm well enough to write again. We are saved, and we are in hell. It was the sight of little Ollie that set Papa's mind in motion. The skull, he kept saying. It's the skull. He placed it above the mantel and put a candle in the horrible thing. then lit a fire in the fireplace beneath it. He spoke to the fire, but I heard no replies. It should have frightened me, but I don't feel fear anymore. Just an empty sort of numbness. George was running half naked through the hallways like an animal, snarling and scratching at the walls. Mama has been crying and pulling out her hair in the room with the little half door, wailing for her babies, then trying to eat the big clumps of hair. I tried to stop her at first, but it didn't matter. We are all mad now, I suppose. I burned all the food in the pantry. It's useless to us now. The meat tasted too good. We all cried when we ate. The twins. The twins. They have saved us, free from whatever hell lies ahead. We understand the clothes now, the trinkets. Harrison figured it out too, when he dug up the graveyard out back. Hundreds of bones. So many. The deep knife gouges on the bones. I wonder if Grandfather took them to the slaughtering shed. Did it in the kitchen. Why does flesh taste so sweet and good? It is my sucker now. God save us. Or the devil. It makes no difference to me now. We need more. If we do not feed, then we will turn on one another. Papa and George are going at it now, trying to decide what happens next. George wants to die. Papa says he will help. Mama has locked herself away on the 3rd floor, and we cannot find the key. Grandfather lived alone. It was the only way. Do not visit. I will not write again. I hope the help comes soon. We will need them. The Cheer Up Johnny's work has been crazy, but here's a little ditty for you. The Cheer Up Johnnies. In the Blue Room of the Archives, staff only, there is a collection of musical trinkets, one of which is labeled as the Cheer Up Johnnies. It's a ceramic piece that appears to be modeled after a moderately popular barbershop quartet, named as the label states. In the early 1900s, there were 5 dapper dandies in a classic barbershop outfit, striped vest, slacks, and formal straw hats, all standing on a bandstand. It sounds pretty tame, but the singers have wild, 2 big eyes and wild, 2 big smiles on some of them. It's forbidden to touch it without gloves, personally. I hate looking at things. We have many of those, and I swear they switch places sometimes. Their mouths are supposed to be singing or smiling, but they have too many teeth, or their mouths are just black void pits. I've compiled some of the curator notes below. Artifact P145, Curator Harrison, June 1947. Description omitted. Artifact brought in by Redacted due to interagency agreement, added to musical item list that must remain locked. Gloves are mandatory when handling artifacts. Redacted is not the original owner of Peace, but reported locating a few identical boxes from the commemorative annual Barbershop Quartet event that Peace was created for. Other boxes do not have similar disturbing facial expressions and appear normal. X-rays and extensive notes by analysts from Redacted provided. It appears that facial expressions are part of ceramic and not from any sort of later alternatives. Note, these notes appear lost, but the X-ray is still in the files for P145. When the key is turned, the musical tune that plays is similar to Buffalo Gals with an altered bridge. Unlike most other music boxes or toys, music starts slow, then speeds up until music is indiscernible, then stops abruptly. Redacted. Caution against listening to the music box and recommended welding key, so it cannot be turned. Great caution is advised. Objects will be kept under lock and key, with strict orders not to disturb or handle except by curator permission. Curator Harrison, August 1948 P145 has caused some disturbance, so adding some notes to document the events. First observation is P145 attracts those in low spirits or moods. When someone is feeling a bit blue, they hang around the Blue Room unironically and can get quite unruly when forced away. Redacted. Had to be taken out by force only days after returning from the birth of her child. When dusting the objects in P145's cabinet over the weekend, a staff member bumped P145 into P16, which caused a hairline fracture in the 5th quadrant of P145. Staff members reported feeling extreme melancholy and an urge to listen to P145 and did so. Despite strict orders not to turn, the staff member was still found standing at the cabinet Monday morning, still listening to the music box and laughing hysterically after forced removal of P-145. From their hands, a staff member collapsed in exhaustion and was rushed to a local hospital. Staff members had clearly soiled themselves standing at the cabinet over the entire weekend. Blue rum is to be thoroughly cleaned and sanitized. The cabinet was only half dusted, but I will finish it myself. Hairline fracture will be examined and, if possible, fixed. P-16 was undamaged by the event, as expected, and looked very proud of itself, but moving P-16 to a separate case since it always bloody has it out for other artifacts. Evening hairline fracture fixed by restorationalist on staff under my close supervision. Both of us reported feeling extremely giddy during the procedure, almost to the point of being unable to completely fix it because of an overwhelming desire to sing and dance around the room. Curator Harrison, December 1948, restorationalist over P-145 hairline fracture report, still feeling residual giddiness from time to time. I myself have occasionally locked my office door to dance about, and must contain the urge to sing from time to time. Although it's less frequent now, I may need to start putting items on the danger scale. Redacted mentioned another agency does this, but might raise too many eyebrows here. Curator Harrison, February 1950. Some depressive numbskull, now fired, took P-145 from the case into the public reading room and played it over and over. Only 4 members of the public and 2 staff members, excluding Numbskull, were in a reading room at the time, but by the time I came back from lunch, they were all in there, laughing hysterically and dancing around the tables like a bunch of buffoons. Only Redacted was spared because I suspect he is mostly deaf, although he did have a ludicrous grin the whole time I was questioning him. I wonder if whatever resides in this artifact, it is related to that dancing event in 1518 in Alsace. Some villages or others had an outbreak where residents could not stop dancing. Now diagnosed as mass hysteria, I can't help but think there was some bauble like this involved to ignite the fire. Scheduling welding of keys tonight. I prolonged it this far to try and preserve the artifact, but it proves too dangerous. I had to call Redacted to come by and take care of members of the public, so they would only recall a very boring, uneventful trip to the museum. Still, they all will feel quite overjoyed for the next few months at least. Might be good for donations at least. Curator Olmsted, May 1968 night crew in for cleaning reports that the figures have changed around. The short fat one moving around confirmed this to be true after observation. One night crew forgot glove protocol and touched bare ceramic. Slowly after they could not stop laughing. I was phoned to come assist as the rest of the crew was spooked. The poor fool was still hysterically laughing when we heard ribs snapping. I had to keep them all in the back staff room until Redacted came to give proper medical attention and memory assistance. Faxed Redacted later to see if P-145's placement here is appropriate. Blackie on the phone said, and I quote, "We don't want that creepy shit here. Most of what they do is creepy. Idiots. This thing gives me the creeps. Recommend further curators cover it with a cloth or something, but for some reason, I'm too afraid to do it." The Sailor's Talisman. There's an artifact in one of the lower levels of the archive rooms. Just for full disclosure, there are many artifact rooms, but all the main ones were built in a sort of basement over 100 years ago or so, and wallpapered in different colors. Each room has a different clearance for staff and volunteers. Volunteers may only go into the green room, green for go, green meaning easy. Green means safe. Artifacts from the green room may be examined, but not taken by members of the public. Upon request, of course, they must know what they are looking for in order to ask to examine it. The Sailor's Talisman is in the purple room, accessible only to staff and certain high-up people, influential types like authors or big bucks donors. The talisman is a funny little thing, a sort of mermaid-looking thing carved from wood, perhaps old driftwood. It's a woman with a fish tail, but it's forked off into 4 fins at the end, not 2 like your typical mermaid. Her eyes are perfect circles, and her mouth is opened slightly, with long strands of seaweed slithering down her body. The seaweed covers her breast, but in between them, in the sternum area, is a symbol, sort of cross between an ankh and a sulfur cross. A rounded top cross, like an ankh sitting on top of a triangle. It's very light to carry, but she's always damp. Not damp. Now that I think about it, the water actually seems to leak from the talisman itself. She is kept in a specially built box in a shallow pool of water. She used to be kept next to a dehumidifier until the power went out once. The purple rum had about an inch of water in it before someone discovered it. Someone on me had to sit outside in the garden with her until the electrician came to fix the power. The roses looked fantastic that year, though. We discovered, purely by accident, that if she is kept in a small pool of water, the talisman will not seep water. An equilibrium of sorts is met. She has an entry log from the previous curator, and I'll end this little story here with the log. I've skipped over the beginning part that also described her out of vanity for my own far superior description. My additions are in parenthesis. Artifact P174. Curator Olmsted, April 1967. Artifacts donated by Boston Area Historical Society, who wishes to remain anonymous, states that they are unable to house the object anymore due to damage of property. Rotting wood and flooding they claimed was caused by an object called the Sailor's Talisman. Donor describes P174 was thought of as lost for decades, but later found washed up on coast near Maine. Exchanged many hands until the donor eventually received it. Origins unknown, but earliest mentions can be found in Things of the Deep by Randall Carter, a collection of legends and myths surrounding ships and seafaring. Note I've not been able to locate copies of this book yet, not for lack of trying, according to legend. There were numerous of these talismans around on the eastern coast of the United States, traced back as far as the early colonial days, possibly further. Ship captains, according to legend, commissioned their creation by a handful of artisans who had been blessed by some sort of priest. The text is unclear, naming them sea priests. Although I have not been able to corroborate what these priests were, there is no mention of them in historical writings from the coastal towns of the time, and it is unknown exactly what areas these come from. It is created from driftwood, so the origin is difficult to ascertain. It is fascinating that this is the one surviving talisman. No others have been confirmed. Around the 1920s, the talismans were no longer viewed as protective, but as destructive, since the ships that had them on board met with horrific, sometimes freak accidents, or more often, simply disappeared. I suspect most of the remaining talismans, if they are still even in existence, are at the bottom of various bays along the coast. Some ships were confirmed, according to Randall Carter, to have a talisman. Man's Goodbye, estimated 1785. Missing, presumed lost at sea. The Laughing Dutchman, estimated 1801. Accident, ran into cliffs during a storm. The Virtuous Maid, estimated 1811. Missing, presumed lost at sea. Steve. George's Fire, estimated 1692. Missing. Confirmed sighting of wreckage by the Mary's Crown, but when Royal Navy dispatched to investigate, wreckage was not found. Fighting sea dogs. Data no. Accident. Fire while docked in the Caribbean. All crew on board presumed dead. Etc., etc., etc. The symbol is odd, though. I've been unable to locate an origin. Perhaps the artisan symbol, or a guild long lost to time. Sometimes a sound seems to emit from P174 when submerged in water. A haunting sound, almost like a strange song, more like a wail, but faintly melodic, seemed to put my assistant in a trance, and he began to leave the room with a talisman before Esther. His wife, an assistant curator at the time, threw a book at his head. I do not recall these events, though Esther says I was present. Recommend item for the Purple Room due to issue with flooding and legend of cursed nature, as well as potential hypnotic side effects. When handling, a minimum of 2 staff needed, 1 female preferably. Do not allow near watercraft of any kind as a precaution, of course. Entry ends here. I haven't heard the singing mentioned in the entry, although the male staff have mentioned being unnerved by it when they come into the Purple Room. As a precaution, only female staff are allowed in the Purple Room alone. Oddly, this isn't the only object we have that seem to affect the sexes differently. The Orange Room has the opposite effect. No unaccompanied female staff. Another story for another time. Her eyes are haunting though. They're round. So round. Perfect circles like a fish's eye. And what is that symbol? I don't think it's the mark of a guild or an artisan signature. I feel I've seen it before, here within the archive in some documentation somewhere, something that talks more about these mysterious sea priests. I don't think they were priests of the Christian faith, but something much older. Her eyes. They're so round, though. Perfect circles. Perfect.